All right, all of you freedom-loving boys and girls, welcome to Mission Critical Podcast. If you are watching this podcast, you know, we say this all the time, and I'm going to continue to say it every time. It's not a joke. If you're watching this, you are the resistance. It is up to each and every one of us to speak our minds and to resist and to, I saw something. I know we're going to teach the class here, but I just got to throw this out there. I saw something on someone else's podcast the other day, and I really liked it because I've been saying this for a long time. What happened to those classical liberals, of when I was growing up as a kid? Well, this other person, it wasn't Seymour Hersh, but think of some other, older, kind of classical, true journalist, said that, that us, the people, me and yous watching this, the me and yous who look at this type of content, we really are the rabble rousers. We really are that, that political revolution, however you want to phrase it. It really is us, and what a strange coming full circle. And that's kind of why we're teaching these classes, is because we really are the people who are trying to reach down deep and speak our minds and, and fight against tyranny and repression and censorship. And that's what we're trying to do here tonight. We're just three knuckleheads, just guys who put on their pants just like anyone else. And tonight is the third final episode of our Go Bags, Gear, and Getting There podcast. Hey, fellas, before I kind of dive into it, anybody got any little intro things to say in this final episode? Redbeard, Paul, anybody? Otherwise, I'm going to keep flowing.
Yeah, basically, this is just going to be kind of a wrap up and just going over the last section of it. So we hope everybody gets a little something out of this, and we'd love to see what you guys have to say throughout. So that's all I got for it.
Paul.
Yeah, I think it's a little disappointing that it's coming to an end for this class, but maybe we can have others depending on the.
Well, I think we will try to do others, but I'm also, and for anybody who is watching, I'm not going to lie. It's already been a 13-hour day for me. So I'm a little smoked. I'm not, doing this and then doing Centerline Systems and then, doing our standard Mission Critical podcast on Thursday. Matter of fact, I'm just going to jump right into that. A little piece of housekeeping. So we did an audible because last week there was those Senate hearings. So before we get into the class, this Thursday, so we shoot our Mission Critical podcast on Thursday and then we post it on Friday, but we're going to have some special guests and we're going to follow up on our previous UFO topic, and especially in light of everything that's just happened, not only the congressional hearings, but the supposed really good video of 3 saucer-like objects flying over. Was that, anybody know, was that New Mexico or is that Arizona? Have you guys seen that news yet?
I haven't seen that one yet, no.
Yeah, well, and then, and there's, go check it out. So finally, no shaky cam, really good footage, 3 saucer type of objects flying over. And then there's some fighter jets that are supposedly being scrambled, but they don't actually ever move to intercept. That's my opinion from what I've seen. But Jeremy, you and I will bring that up on Thursday. So yeah, without further ado, unless you guys got anything else to go into it, we're just going to jump right into the class. What do you guys got, boys?
We're good.
All right. We're good.
Yeah,
all right.
I think we're good. Let's hop into it.
Okay. Last little piece of housekeeping then. One plug. If you are watching this, whether you're watching this with us live or if you're watching this later, we just wrapped up our charity auctions. We did 4 charity auctions. We raised just under $4,000. And if these other organizations chip in and match this one person's donation, we will have raised over $4,000. So that's a really cool thing. Hats off, and my head bowed in all sincerity to everybody who participated and cast their bids and shit talked, in the comment section and all that. Made it really great. 4 veteran-oriented charities that we raised almost $4,000 for. So that was really cool.
Nice.
That's my housekeeping. Yep. All right. So now we'll jump into tonight's final episode of Go Bags, Gear, and Getting There. Now, what we didn't do last time, and I'm going to bring it over to this view here. What we didn't do last time, we didn't have enough time, and we're just going to tuck it in between episode 2 and episode 3. Is, everybody talks about food, fire, water, shelter. Well, I mean, I guess maybe shelter should encompass clothing, because I think clothing is very important. And you really need to consider, again, your environment, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what you think is the most probable, or most, damaging of probabilities of outcomes. So you've got to really sit there and ask yourself, what about your clothing? What are you going to do? Right. So again, as always, if you've seen the previous episodes, we don't really have to sit and read these slides. You're adults. You can figure it out for yourself. The point I want to make here is when you consider clothing. So I live in northern Minnesota. So when I consider clothing, I don't just consider clothing for this month. I've got actually multiple bags, and I have, they're boxes, actually, like little gear boxes. I've got a winter one and I've got a summer one, right? And there's in between clothing that you've got to kind of pull and push into your bags, whether it's your vehicle box or whether it's your go bag. And, and you've got to look at the environmental considerations of your, the area, where it is, your AO, your area of operations, or that you might be traveling into, or that you're trying to make your way into. And for me, the simplest way to approach this is just start at the top of your head and then work your way all the way down to your feet. And again, without getting into it, because there's pros and cons, synthetic versus wool. We could save those intricate details for another time. I personally prefer wool over man-made materials, synthetic materials. I think there's a lot to be said for it. Again, do your own research. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I mean, because again, wool weighs more. And if it's wet, it weighs even more, right? Where synthetics are very light and they're easily bundled up and put into stuff sacks and things of this nature. But if they get around a fire, they can pop open, you lose the cells, and then you're losing the heat. They're more easily damaged, harder to fix. A wool shirt that gets a fire, ember from a fire on it, I can easily throw some, needle and thread through that and bring that back together, and it's as good as new. I can't do that with a puffy jacket, right? It just isn't going to work the same way. But it's head to toe, and I think where I want to go with this, because I know these two gentlemen will have something to say. Everybody forgets about their feet, right? And I'm here to tell you, just from my humble personal life of doing this for real, foot maintenance is one of the most overlooked aspects of your physical conditioning and your physical well-being in a protracted or extended outdoor environment, especially if it's cold weather or if it's wet or you're walking through swamps, that kind of stuff. You better be taking care of your feet. And socks are worth more than gold in those moments. Matter of fact, before I turn it over to these guys, I'll throw myself under the bus real quickly. This was Army Reserve. Yeah, it was Army Reserve Light Infantry. And look, and someone could say, oh, it's the reserves. It's not, I'm like, oh no, that actually was probably the best unit I'd ever been with in my whole life. And I was on probably hour 74 of no sleep, totally smoked. We went out and did an ambush, live fire ambush, right? This is how we used to train. It was back in the day when people were still soldiers and, or you were training that way. I mean, we had claymores in our rucksacks, grenades, live ammo, and you left and you locked and loaded and you went off and did your 10-kilometer patrol, set up an ambush, did all that stuff and came back. But it rained on us. And even though I was the squad leader, the PL and the PSG, the platoon sergeant, the APL, they said, oh no, okay, you guys did a good job. Now we're going to take charge and we're just going to get you back. And they got us lost. And I'm like, no, it's not that ridge line. It's this one. And then now you can see where this went. And what should have been like a 4-hour movement back became an all-night movement in the middle of just this crazy rainstorm. And I was begging my platoon sergeant for a pair of dry socks because that's all I wanted. I just wanted dry socks, man. So, all right, guys, what do you guys think on the clothing thing? We don't need to beat it too much, but you guys got something you want to add, or you want to poke fun of me crying over wet socks?
Well, I think I would say that mine's more embarrassing because I learned my need for socks from Lieutenant Dan when I was in my 20s, and it turned out to be true. So, I followed through that, and it was confirmed by those that were in positions like yours that I met down the road that confirmed that was true. And, going through the years, absolutely feet first, really. Yeah. And one thing I did want to mention, though, synthetic versus natural. When it comes to wool and synthetics in that situation, yeah, that's 100% accurate. But synthetics, let's say, versus cotton, when you have polyester or quick dry clothes like this shirt that I have on, that's not natural. And, in that situation, I would go with synthetic over the natural. But when it comes to wool and the puffy jacket, I'm going wool because it does retain, heat, even if it is wet. And, if it's a bad situation, that will work well.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because not to, we're kind of moving past that so we can get into the primary focus: shoot, move, communicate, medicate. But because again, you could literally spend, I'm not even joking, like a good 4 to 8 hours just talking about clothing. And Paul, you just brought up a great point. There is definitely times where that moisture wicking, and synthetic material, but like regular cotton, like white socks, not just no, but hell no. I mean, so there's some of those things that'll actually put you in an even worse situation. Like, oh, I'm just going to go throw this rucksack in my back and I'm going to walk off in the woods and I'm going to be wearing, white athletic socks. Good luck with that, buddy. I mean, like, if you don't get blistered within the first 2 to 3 miles, then you have a superpower. That's all I would say about it.
Yeah. So no cotton.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Jeremy, what do you got to add to that, sir?
Yeah. So actually, I'm just going to briefly hit on a couple things here. When it comes down to clothing, everybody should just keep in mind, right? Like Mark, you hit, like, pack for the time of year, pack for the conditions you're expecting, and even the conditions you're not expecting. It all adds up after a while. We hit on weight. It does make a difference, and we'll get more into that as we go. But also, as it pertains to socks, and I'm going to hit on one other thing for feet after. I would recommend some of the best places to find decent socks, especially as it pertains to going over terrain, longer or extended, like, expeditions. Like, dude, the hiking companies kind of have it dialed in. Like, commercial private hiking companies, they put out a lot of really good stuff. Not only stuff that's going to support your feet, but is really going to help your feet for longevity. And amazingly enough, like, wool has come a long way. There's more than one type of wool, so make sure you know what kind of wool you're getting, and make sure that it's the brand that's actually going to be that's going to make sense for what you're doing. On just a brief note, get footwear that is fitted to you, because having a badly fitted pair of boots or shoes or whatever will be overwhelmingly detrimental to your ability to not only traverse terrain, but to be able to go a duration of time before you have a mechanical or a medical injury. So,
and that's a great point. I mean, and I didn't want to just gloss over the slide. Again, I do want to get into the shoot, move, communicate, medicate, but the clothing, especially your feet and your footwear and your socks. I mean, Jeremy, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of modern day, outdoor companies that have really put the research and the development into it, and they've put the thought into it, and there's some really good socks that, because so here, a little trick perhaps, right, is, turn your socks inside out. That's a trick I learned way back in the day. You didn't wear your socks right side in when you were doing long foot marches, and that may have had something to do with, like, how socks were manufactured and what was available, back in the 80s. Nowadays, I don't think that's as important. Again, you do you, but that's what you got to figure out. But to the point of boots, and I don't want to get into trying to advocate for one company or the other, but they have to be fitted. If you're ordering boots online, I mean, I guess, with nowadays, like, a lot of companies will do the free returns and all that stuff, and it might take you 4 times before you get the boot that fits you. But I remember, like, before I went overseas, like, when I was going to that place overseas that had lots of mountains, I had 2 pairs of boots with me. One pair was like $350. The other one was almost $600. And, and if I would have worn through one of those pairs in the 3 to 6 months, depending on what that tour was I was doing, right? But if I would have went through that, that would have been every penny well paid. So I'm here to tell you, there's plenty of times where it's like, I'm up at like 9,000, above sea level, and I've got to go all the way down to 6,000, and we're talking at like, this, like I'm going 3,000 feet, but I'm only laterally going like, maybe, 300 meters. It's almost a straight down drop, and you've got to move for time, right? Because your life is, depends on it, or the life of your colleagues depend on it. Dude, I would just take the 3 seconds, tighten up my boots, and then just go. But good boots, They're,
Yeah.
I almost think, again, a good pair of fitted boots, like what, Redbeard just did. And, again, you don't have to say what brand name that is, Jeremy, but they're not all created equal. And, you can go out and get a pair of boots for 40 or 50 bucks. But those boots usually don't last you more than, they wouldn't have lasted even a week doing what I was doing. I'm going through really high-end mountaineering, high-end boots. They're all fitted, and there's no seams. It's not slipping. The tongue isn't moving around. And it's worth every penny. And if you can afford it, that's what you got to do. And the other thing is, and there's I'll throw his name out there, Cody Lindell. He's a big believer in just wearing, like multiple layers of socks and not even doing boots. And I've actually tried that. And there's something to be said for that. But at the end of the day, I'm not advocating one technique or one company or the other, but you've got to figure this out. And we just spent like almost 10 minutes talking about your feet and footwear and socks. And, Gold Bond, and you got to have good tape, and, and don't be afraid of taping up your feet or putting Band-Aids and popping those blisters. Cause and if you're going to think that this is what you're going to do, if your option is, I'm building a bag designed around bugging out, and then therefore I've got to be able to carry between 50 and 100 pounds, whatever your weight load is and how it cubes out. Well, then you better go out and start exercising, conditioning those feet to get accustomed to that because it's very different walking over grass and through swamps and that kind of stuff as it is on tarmac. So your boots, your socks, and foot maintenance is it's really important. We could have almost just done a whole episode.
Well, and to be fair, Mark, and just to kind of end it, just a final note on my part, it just really goes to emphasize like how important footwear and taking care of your feet is. It can't, like, literally of all the different things, it can't be understated that if your feet are mechanically broken, if they're getting blisters, if you're having your skin peel off, if there's all of these different, which can happen. I've done it hiking, right? Like blisters happen. A lot of stupid shit happens, and and you just got to kind of prep for it. But in the end of the day, like those are in many ways your lifeline. So I don't think it can be emphasized enough, just to kind of wrap up my end of it.
Nope. Paul, want to add to that?
Just one more thing. I would say just make sure that when you have a bug out bag or whatever you have, don't have a brand new pair of boots. Make sure you have a broken in pair.
Break them
before you leave.
Way to go. Awesome.
Yeah, and change those socks often. And then, I want to throw the last thing in. I'm just kind of looking at the slide for the first time here. And, this goes into Carver. And if for anyone who watched the previous episodes or watched the Mission Critical podcast where we broke Carver down into a great, to really, we spent basically an episode and a half talking about this thing called Carver. But if you look at the very end, that's kind of a Carver-esque type of way of looking at it. So whatever these garments, these tools, again, whether it's your rucksack, here we were talking about clothing, but it applies to everything. One of the main questions you have to ask yourself is, can you make it? Can you repair it? Can you make the tools or the things necessary to repair whatever it is? So you really have to weigh that and take that in consideration. Again, if you're playing for the scenario where there's not going to be a supply chain and whatever's out there in the environment is out there, there's still going to be places, those stores, and there's going to be boots and, whatever, but can you get to those places? Would you get killed or ambushed or whatever en route? Does that fit into your master plan? Will they be ransacked by other people, before you even get there? So whatever you have, it's basically the 2 is 1, 1 is none, and 1 will always be none if you can't repair it. The moment 1 breaks, if it's unrepairable, if you don't have the skills or the resources to fix it, then 1 becomes none at that point right there. The Mish, have duct tape. Damn right.
And right. On top of duct tape, super glue is great. Just saying.
The thread and needle, like a sewing kit, you should have multiple sewing kits, 100-mile-an-hour tape, duct tape, whatever you want to call it. A stupid little side note, because I'm a sci-fi kind of buff, and there's this series that I've listened to in audiobooks, and long story short, they make contact with a couple different alien races. Some are hostile towards us, some are kind of neutral, but we don't know how to really deal with them. But this neutral, we kind of think they're ugly, but they're kind of becoming our besties, and they see the humans. They see the humans repairing some stuff, and with duct tape, and the aliens don't know what the hell that is, and they think that's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they want to trade technology for duct tape. I mean, so the author was a former military guy, so he had to throw that in there, but I thought that was really cool. So
that's great.
All right, moving on. Anything you guys want to add to that?
No, I'm good on my side.
Okay, moving on. Next slide. Then here we go. Now we're going to, well, okay, I guess we need to throw one more. I forgot about this. Then there's the miscellaneous, whether you want to call it back to Carver, the X factor, but other things that you should really take in consideration. Now, I just threw a list together of things that when I made the slide deck, that was going through my mind. I think if I made this class right now, I might have the same, I might have a few different ones on there, but there's all kinds of other miscellaneous items that you really should take in consideration. To me, I know it's on there is tools. Like you really should be thinking like, and I'm not picking on one brand or the other. I'm not I'm not being an advocate for, whether it's a Gerber or a Leatherman, but you've got to figure out which one you like. And, and again, it takes up space and it weighs, right? So you've got to figure this out. Maybe you want to carry a hammer. I'm not joking. In my early days in the military, I had wire cutters inside of one of my extra ammo cases. Why? Because I could then, without having to have bolt cutters or anything else, I could still cut through concertina wire. Not going to lie. If you're out in the woods and you're doing maneuvers and there's suddenly a fence, I could cut through a fence. I could cut through little pieces of metal so I could then, make them into some other thing that I need. So you got it. So what I'm basically saying is think in the terms of what would be some really good small hand tools that you might want to carry with you. Here, for bushcrafters, maybe you want to carry an auger because you can always cut a branch, get it the right size, shave it down with your knife, throw it through the top of the auger so you've got a handle, and now you've got an auger and you can now start making, your own furniture or a litter, and making dowels and constructing your own type of whatever it is, an A-frame or another rucksack pack or, frame or something like that. So whatever you're thinking for you, for your group, for the situation that you think you're going to find yourself in, and then for the environment you're operating in, you might want to really consider certain hand tools, like a shovel. I'm really surprised that people like shovels aren't a bigger thing anymore. Like I barely ever see people even talking about shovels or carrying shovels around. I've got a shovel in my vehicle. I never, that's not even my wintertime shovel. That's just a survival shovel that's always in my vehicle.
Yeah, some type of a knee tool can go a long way. So, I mean, it's there, and it's funny because I think you can find them. At least you used to be able to find them fairly cheap, but I think they're a little more up in price now. But I was going to say, even like med shears, like you can use these for so many different things.
Well, that'll go into the Medicaid part, because you have to have a medical shear. I mean, like that is the set of scissors. You don't need another set of scissors. You have a medical.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yep. Paul, you want to add anything to that? You're on mute, by the way, sir.
Yeah. So one of the things that I carry based on my area of heavy brush is I carry pruners, and it's just easier than trying to use a knife or carry a machete. So that's based on my environment. And I do also carry a shovel, but it's a mini root slayer type shovel. It's almost one that a garden shovel. It's real short, 6 inches. I find that to be helpful. Because you're correct. I find there's so many times I need to, and not dig a hole, just to take care of business, just dig a hole in general. And, so those two tools are ones that I add in addition to my others.
Well, I mean, just don't forget, as you're building your shelter, again, whatever your scenario is, if you're on the move and you're setting up a new shelter every night, well, is it going to be raining? What is your environment like? Well, if you're setting up a shelter and it's raining, why aren't you digging a small trench around the outside of your shelter so all that water comes off, goes into that trench, and then runs away? Unless you want to sleep in that shit, you do you, I guess, right? But all right, what do you think, fellas? Are we good on that? Here I see that one more thing. I'm going to end with the last one. So whether it's paracord, 550 cord, whether it's rope, and that could be, 1 and 9, military rope or mountaineering rope, kern mantle, whatever it is. But the key thing for me right there is you got to learn how to tie knots. And I've been meaning to do this on centerline systems for the longest time. I should probably get off my ass. You don't have to learn how to tie every knot. There's some really cool videos of people tying some really cool ass knots. My thing is learn 5 knots. You've got to figure out, here's the 5 main knots. I need knots that join things together. I need knots that give me a safety end that I can, either use for a fulcrum, or I can use it rappelling, or I can use it to join other things, like a slip knot, and whether it's a clove hitch, an easy joining type of knot. So there's a handful of knots. And again, I'm not here to preach to anyone and tell them what you should or shouldn't do. I'm just saying, in my humble opinion, learn 5 knots that are knots that have that are multifunctional. They, there's some knots only do certain things. But look at that, and figure out and learn and master just a handful of knots. You don't have to learn every knot in the world, right? It's cool if you know a shit ton of knots, because again, those are one of the Instagram videos I like zoning out. It's like some guy, doing a knot thing that I've never seen before. I'm like, that's a really cool knot, dude. You're like, I got knot envy right now. Like that dude knows what he's doing. But and look, and I'm in the military. I was a rappel master, so I kind of know my way around ropes to some extent, right? For what that's worth. But yeah, learn some knots. You just got to learn some basic knots. So I wanted to leave before we move on. I wanted to throw that out there right there because I mean, and some people might say so here in the miscellaneous, the natural resources. I just saw somebody else doing a bow drill. And if you've got a bow drill kit that you make ahead of time and you've done it right, and you've rigged it up properly, so you're not just like, right then in the moment in the middle of a rainstorm trying to put together a bow drill. And there's some people who've got some really good bow drill kits already made ahead of time. So that kind of goes to natural resources. If you make that stuff and have fun and practice that ahead of time, you either have that in your rucksack or you're just that much more prepared, going forward. Same thing with ropes. If you know anything about ropes, you're going to look at vegetation and bark and all the stuff around you, and you're going to figure out how to make improvised materials that you could use to do, to just tie off some things if you're cribbing or whatever the case is, without having to cut into your rope or your 550 cord to do it. So it's worth looking into those natural resources and knots. All right, fellas, before I move forward, what do you got?
I got nothing.
I would say that even a granny knot will help you a little bit, right? And it seems like every knot I tie when I'm first learning turns into a slip knot. But overall, if I do, practice is what I found works best, and I think that's just stating the obvious. And I do that so that I don't have those slip knots.
Yeah, slip knots, granny knots. They're knots. They technically fall in that category. All right, here we go. Boys, without further ado then, so we're going to move into it, right? The heart of the matter. But we didn't get to that stuff last time, and that is also important. I kind of, honestly, I feel like we just kind of moved through that rather quickly. But, again, this was really designed to be, this was a 4 to 8 hour class. So, we're trying to do this in 3 1.5 hour periods, with all of us talking. And by the way, if anyone's watching, it seems we do have a few people watching. I just want to, we kind of did this at the beginning in the last couple episodes. I'm just going to throw this out there. The 3 of us will keep going over the slide deck and talking, but really what we want to do is the comments. If there's somebody out there who's got a great point or feels that they've got, something to say, dude, reach out, leave the comment, and we'll get your face right here on the live stream so you can actually share some of the information or your experiences with everybody else as well. Because, otherwise, I know we all have really nice beards, but, let's get everybody else involved. If you want to do it, jump in. So here we go. The 4 food groups. This is, people can call it anything, a million things, but shoot, move, communicate, medicate. Now, before I go into the slide deck, I didn't really plan this. I'm going to throw Paul and Redbeard under the bus. What do you guys think? What does that mean to you? Does that seem superfluous, or does that make sense when you're thinking of, again, whatever your scenario is and whatever type of bag you're trying to construct? Shoot, move, communicate, medicate. Anybody want to jump in?
You want to go first, Paul?
Yeah. So I think that, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily follow it in that order as far as what I'm thinking, but, I would think, and maybe I'm just not getting it, but we'll see. So as first thing you're doing is you're moving, right? We have a bug out, we're moving. We have to be able to communicate with those that we know, those that we don't know where they're located. And shooting is kind of the last case scenario, but if you're not prepared, then, you might be in deep trouble. I missed one.
Medicate.
Medicate. Okay. Be trained. carry the essentials, minimally a tourniquet. And again, that's just going to get you to the point where you can radio for rescue. So maybe you need an SOS device. I don't even know if you get to the point where will that actually work? But yeah, so make sure you're able, and don't just, buy the kit and not test it. And I know that it's expensive that way, because you have this IFAC that you buy and you have it all sealed up and it's ready to go. But if you don't know how to use what's in there, then it's worthless, because you're going to get there, you open the stuff up, you won't even know what to do with it. So absolutely, they do sell training kits out there. I know people do all over the place. So get the training ones; they're a little bit cheaper, and then you can do that. So that's what I think of when I see this slide.
Okay, all right, and we're going to get into each of those in a little bit more detail. But I'm really right now, I'm just wondering if, because again, somebody might say, well, I'm not really concerned about shooting, or maybe moving doesn't make any sense, but. So, you kind of going back to the military, that's what I have to fall back upon, right? That's my experience in my training is, hey, you've got to have this ability to be able to. So we're talking about whether it's bugging in or bugging out, you're still going to be talking about, I have to have these certain other abilities outside of what's in my bag. And my argument is you're going to have to be able to shoot. And there's more to it than that. You're going to have to be able to move. We just kind of talked about that, just about socks, but it goes even farther in depth than that. You're going to have to be able to communicate. Now, the world could be over. There's no more cellular service, and the internet's dead. But that doesn't preclude you from being able to communicate with people in your parties or people within your group, your network. There's other ways of communication. And then at the end of the day, you obviously have to be able to medicate and because there's no hospital to go to anymore. So anything just as simple as a simple infection or a toothache could become cataclysmic. So that's why I have it broken down that way. Now, so before we get into it, Paul, thanks for, giving your thoughts. Redbeard, what are your thoughts on that? Have we left anything out there, or again, just generally speaking, what are your thoughts on that right there?
Yeah. So, I would actually, and I don't know, Mark, if you and Paul would agree with this, but I would almost say that, all four of them require some level of, skill. And it might sound bizarre to some people as it pertains to movement, but let's put it this way: anybody that's gone out hiking, how many of you can actually traverse a decent bit of terrain without constantly having your eyes glued to the ground? How many of you can take what you see ahead of you and process that, be able to traverse that terrain and be able to do so without basically spilling over yourself, right? I'll be honest, like when I first started, it sucked. It was difficult. But it's something that you learn how to do. You adapt to it. And that's one of those things to where it's like, okay, well, like Marcus said 100 times over, you think you're just going to walk out into the woods, or you think you're just going to walk into the situation. Well, look, in my situation, regardless of whether it's a worst case situation or whether I'm just going out hiking with a family member or a friend, I am perpetually trying to keep my eyes in front of me and what's around me, as opposed to having them continuously glued to the ground. Now, granted, the worse the terrain gets, you should be a little bit more aware of what's going on in front of you on the ground, but you shouldn't constantly be glued there. So I would say that maybe not so much a skill set, but you're developing a level of awareness that I think is required. And so when we look at these four things, it does take practice. It does take time. So if you're not taking the time to learn and adapt and become more aware of how to shoot better, how to move better, how to further communicate better, and furthermore, how to use what you have at your disposal medically to the best of your abilities, then you're just putting yourself at a further disadvantage. And I think we'll be able to expound a lot more on that as we go.
So I love how you just kind of, again, if you've watched any of the other videos, we don't rehearse this. This isn't planned. We're just kind of like, ad hocing, this just comes up. Jeremy just made a great point, and you can see me smiling because, just like, I'm just going to throw this rucksack on my back and I'm just going to head out into the woods. I mean, there's so many things wrong with that statement, you know, and I've heard that from so many people. And one of them is what Jeremy just brought up, like moving. So, okay, it's a zombie apocalypse, right? It's a worst case scenario, whether there's raiders or, you know, like, you know, for you, this is actually more like conducting a reconnaissance patrol. Like you have to sneak through the woods, because if somebody sees you or finds you, they're going to attempt to kill you and take all your shit, or they're going to eat your brains because it's zombies. And if you're by yourself, or even if you're within a group, that dynamic right there, you've got to not just know land navigation, right? You know, like whether you're just doing, you know, like, you know, celestial navigation, orienting by the stars, the sun, you know, watch method, stick method, you've got a compass, you know. Are there going to be GPSs in your scenario? I have no idea. Should you be relying on GPSs? I mean, think about how many of your car GPSs always tell you to go a route that, you know, is, you know, inefficient or incorrect. You know, and then on top of that, you've got to be looking at the terrain, as Jeremy said, because if you're reading the terrain, you know, if you go, hey, look at how this water is really moving and boiling. Okay, so that tells you something about water that's calm with gentle ripples. That even right there tells you where you should cross a river. Or I'm looking at that mountain, that ridge line in front of me. Am I looking for a spur? Because then there's going to be a draw, and I know that's going to be this type of rock in there, or deadfalls, or whatever, you know. And if you go up that, you might expend so much energy because there's so much debris there, where if you did it, but then if you're on the military crest, if you're silhouetting yourself, well, then maybe people are seeing you, right? So there's all these different things. And then you might be looking for signs of game, or you might be looking for signs of bad guys. So the person who's doing that, as Jeremy's saying, they're pretty much eyes down, really focused on what's in front of them. So they're not pulling security. They're not looking for, you know, the ninja or the Bigfoot that's about to kill you. So somebody's got to be walking and pulling security. So there's so much more to this than I'm just going to grab my rucksack and walk out in the woods. And I don't want to keep picking on anybody who thinks that way, but I just think it's totally ill-founded, and that's what we're trying to do here with this next set of slides that we're getting into here. So here we go, moving on. There we go, I got the right one. All right, so shoot.
Before we go on, can I
go ahead?
Jeremy made me think of, you know, we've been talking a lot about being in the rural environments, but in the urban environment, the consideration of keeping your head up. Okay, even when I worked in urban environments and had a, you know, mile walk from the garage to my office, keep your head up. Just know what's on the ground, though, because you could hit a rut in the, you know, the sidewalk or something. So you need to pay attention to both. But yeah, absolutely, know your environment.
Damn right. All right, so here we go. Moving forward. All right, so shoot. It's kind of a cheesy picture, but, you know, just shoot. All right, so now we're going to get into it. You see one way. It's not the only way. That's a picture of, I was doing some training on a range one day, but there's how are you going to carry the stuff that you need, and what does shoot mean? So that's what we're getting into here. So, you know, I think the real question I'm trying to ask, and Paul, I'm glad you actually stated it, you know, at the very beginning when I said, well, what do you guys think about, you know, this, and this? And shoot doesn't necessarily mean, if you think you're going into zombie apocalypse and it's going to be direct action, force on force, kinetic type of stuff. Okay, well, then the tools that you're going to need, you know, going back to that picture, maybe you do want plate carriers at that time. Maybe you are looking at, you know, some type of AR. Or is it, no, I need shooting in order to, you know, procure food? Well, what are the platforms that could do both? I mean, that's another way of looking at it. You know, can you hunt a deer with 5.56? Yeah, of course you could, right? You know, are you going to necessarily, like, you know, try to hunt a squirrel or a rabbit with a 5.56? I mean, you could do it, you know, if you're very accurate, but, you know, if you're not accurate, there's not going to be any meat left in that, you know, that animal. And then you just, you know, giving away your position by the sound of the report of your weapon. You've lost one more round that you're not getting back, and you didn't, you know, procure any of that, you know, that protein that you need to survive. So you've got to start asking yourself, what is it that you really think that you're planning for, you're preparing for? Because shoot, there's a whole litany of what shoot might mean. And again, everybody's, you know, adult. You can read the slide as we're talking. I just want to leave you with, don't rule out certain things. You know, like shotguns. Shotguns can shoot slugs. That's good for, you know, large game. And it can shoot, you know, regular shotgun shells. And if you know your chokes and the types of, you know, shells you're using, you know, that's better for waterfowl or small game, you know, if you know what you're doing. So you can have a weapons platform that can do a multitude of things. Well, look, I mean, you shoot somebody at, 10 yards away with a 12 gauge, even if it's just like, a goddamn target load, that guy isn't going to get up and start throwing punches at you. That guy's pretty much out of the fight at that point in time. You shoot him in the middle of the chest with a slug. Well, I would reckon that person's probably dead. Are you familiar with that platform? I've heard other people make this argument, and this is my last little point here. And I think it's truth, because like whenever I grab my AR, like, I purchased, when I became a civilian, I purchased the same platform that I carried when I was in the agency, because I'm just, it's like an old friend. I mean, and it's, when I'm grabbing that and I'm moving it, it's like, I know what I'm doing with it. It's so beaten into the fiber of my being. It's like a natural impulse. For other people, that you have to learn that, right? That requires repetition. That requires time on the range, training, money, resources, yada, yada, yada. So maybe that's not the resource, or that's not the tool for you. Maybe it should just be that over under a side-by-side shotgun, or that pump, that you grew up with, or the 30-30, like a lever action. All I'm trying to say is, don't just pigeonhole yourself and think it's got to be this one thing because you saw some cool guy doing it. In my humble opinion, all weapons are just tools in a toolbox. You've got to find the tool that you know how to operate properly for whatever the task is that you're trying to perform. And on that note, I know Redbeard's got a thing or two to say, but I want to end it with one other thing: is don't forget the traditional weapons. Again, if it really is the grid down, how much ammo can you carry, and how much ammo are you going to find out in the environment? I think you will find ammo, for a certain period of time, because most people in America have 12 gauge or 22 or 9 mil or maybe 5.56. But that eventually, just like anything else, unless that's being reproduced, that eventually that resource is going to be depleted. So I've always been a big fan of some of the kind of traditional like archery. If you're a zombie apocalypse here, this is where I'm going to end it when we're talking about shoot. So that movie or that TV show, gosh dang it, Walking Dead. I always wondered, like, why are you guys firing your limited resources of bullets? Like, why wouldn't you guys be forming yourselves up like Spartans or Romans with shields and, a couple ranks with spears? Because they're zombies, dude. Like the first ranks hold them off. The second rank is just like head thrust and spears. And, like, you see what I'm kind of saying, guys?
Yep. Yeah.
All right. I know I took us down a weird rabbit hole with like my whole Spartan, Roman. But you see what I'm kind of saying? Like shooting. What is it that you're actually trying to accomplish in the quote unquote shooting? Is it food on the table, or is it personal defense, or is it offense?
Yep.
So who wants to chime in first?
So I can actually add something to that. So when we're looking at the shooting portion of it, the first slide on the shooting portion of it, there's a couple things that pop into mind, having more of like a gunsmithing background, but also doing more tactical style shooting, but also just like growing up and shooting too. So there's a couple things that come to mind. So first off, I know that some people are of two camps. It's either I'm going to clean my gun incessantly to where you can take a white glove and run it basically through the barrel and all over the action, and there's not going to be anything there at all. Or I'm just going to ride the lightning and see what happens. Cleanliness is important. Maintenance is important, 100%. And I'm never going to tell you like, just ride it and see how far it goes. I would always encourage people to maintenance their firearms. But with that being said, you don't have to white glove it, okay? Because there's a certain amount of fouling in that is tolerable in your firearms, that if you clean it too well, or if you get it to a point to where it's too dirty, it's going to produce what's known as flyers. Flyers is basically, to put it very simply, is an accuracy issue. You're not going to have consistent groupings. So there's a certain level of fouling that is required in order to tighten those groups and to further get performance out of it. So that aside, another point that I want to make is it's something that Mark had brought up is, getting to know the firearms that you're using. And I would even further expound upon that of find something that is not just what's recommended by whatever YouTuber. You don't need, I mean, if you want a Delta operator high-speed rifle, knock yourself out. But me and Mark have talked about this several times, to where create a platform, whether it's a rifle or a handgun or a shotgun, whatever it is, create something that's going to be intuitive to use, something that you can generate a set of skills with, adaptability, something that's going to, as it was shown on the slide, that's somewhat multifunctional, but ultimately something that's going to work for you. Me and Mark, we shoot Glocks. Does it mean that a Glock is right for every single person? Absolutely not.
There's not. Nope.
And the thing of it is, so like the point being is, get out there, try different platforms, figure out which one is going to work for you. Now, does that mean you shouldn't learn different platforms you're not comfortable with? Absolutely not. Get outside of your comfort zone. And then on one final note, I'm going to bring this up, but in terms of suppressors, and Mark can probably talk about this as well, for those who are interested in suppressors, be mindful that because of how a suppressor operates, there is going to be an incurred cost of maintenance. Okay, people think you can just throw a suppressor on and it's going to be maintenance the same. It's going to get dirtier. Why? Because of how it utilizes and expands and deals with the gases, right? So there is going to be a trade-off when you use a suppressor, the amount of maintenance that's going to be required. Now, some suppressors do run a little bit cleaner, and then other suppressors may not, but that is something that is worth pointing out. I'll let Paul and Mark take it.
Well, just before we'll come over to Paul, but Spoon just brought up a good point from Montana Null. The big problem is skill. Buying stuff is the easy part. It's when you 100%. Ask people to put a lot of work that the wheels fall off. And that goes into everything you just said there, Jeremy, because I was going to chime in. Look, like you zero your weapon with a 55 grain and then you start shooting a different grain bullet, you're shooting green. And it's the same thing. Now you put a suppressor on, you've got to put in that work and you've got to know your dope. Like, okay, when I'm shooting this grain, it's this. There's a lot of work. So Montana, thank you very much. You're absolutely right. You got to put in the work. And that goes from, that's all of the shoot, move, communicate, medicate. All of this takes a lot of work and a lot of practice and a lot of skill. You've got to get good at it, plain and simple.
And don't just Lego the crap out of.
We've got one last comment. I stick to easy to find ammo, 9.45. Yeah, exactly. So to that last gentleman, I didn't get a chance to quite see the name, but no, I actually made this argument once overseas for a real world operation. I'm like, look, I can get 7.62 by 39 here. So that's what we should go with, because I don't have the supply chain, the logistical tail behind me to support me. I'm going to have to do things in the black market, in the environment. And that's going to be because, where I was in the world, you can figure that out. It wasn't 5.56, it wasn't any of this stuff. It was Soviet era type of, weapons and ammunition. And, of course, I guess that was just too much common sense for people to handle. So, all right, let's bring it over to Paul. Paul, what do you got to add to that so far, sir?
I would say that, if you don't have the expertise of Redbeard and Mark and the past, and you just want to make sure that you have some kind of self-defense, start slow, find out, take advice of what you need and practice. Make sure you know that weapon inside and out, everything beginning. You don't have to have, multiple guns. Well, you don't have to have a lot of guns, but just start off slow, right?
What everybody was. I'm sorry, I just couldn't help it. Everybody else is like, "What do you mean I don't have to have a lot of guns? What is the hell?" But no, you're right. You're right, sir. But you're right though. You're not going to carry all of those guns with you unless your intent was, I'm going to outfit, my own company. Why do you? Well, I guess the answer is because I can. I suppose. But you're only going to carry a couple with you.
Yeah, and get trained, right? Do formal training, even if it's, a friend, or if it's your father when you were younger and you already know how to shoot, then you're good to go, but still practice. But if you're not, and you're new to it and you just go out and buy a gun, even states that are reasonable when it comes to concealed carry permits, they still require some kind of training typically. Not all, but I recommend that you do it. Get official training done. That's the most important thing. Know what you're doing. Do not just treat it like a toy. That's all. And I'm talking at the entry level right at this point. Right?
No, you're absolutely right. No, and hopefully you find a good place. So on that note, my final comment on that would be, if you just want the piece of paper and you think, okay, now I've got the piece of paper and I'm good. Well, good luck, John Wayne. The piece of paper isn't going to save you, right? No, Paul's absolutely right. If you don't already have that background that's been provided to you because of your military service or whatever the case may be, and even then, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Most, even in the infantry, like you're really not actually out there using your weapon, all the time. What everybody thinks, you're doing your your quals. And maybe you get to do some live fire exercises. You are getting a lot of training on it, but it's not what I think everybody thinks it is. And this goes into a previous episode. Paul, you weren't on for this one, but Redbeard, it was me, you, and I can't remember exactly who was on, but we were talking about the dirty civilians. And it's like, there's some civilians out there who have way more training than anybody 100%. In the military or law enforcement do. And God bless them. I mean, but to your point, Paul, I'm just trying to echo that. It's like, go out and get your training, start someplace. Don't just get the piece of paper. You're absolutely right. You got to get the training, start getting a building block, a fundamental, start building up those repetitions, and then continue, and then find other like-minded people where you can continue to even grow more, period.
And can I branch off of that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's, and I know that there's going to be some people out there that are going to be like, well, I can't afford to shoot 100, 200 rounds. That's fine, because actually what I would incentivize, one, dry fire. Like, I know there's some people out there that say, dry fire is blah, 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 blah. It doesn't have recoil. If you're saying dry fire doesn't have recoil, you're missing the point of dry fire. Okay. It's not meant to simulate recoil. There are specific things that dry fire is very good for. Secondly, if all you have allotted, whether it's your long gun or your handgun or whatever, if all you have, say, is 50 rounds, go out to the range and train intentionally. Set a program for yourself and train with intent, as opposed to just going out there, drilling paper, hitting pop cans. If it means that much to you, then go out there and train with intent. And one other area that I want to also just kind of impress upon briefly here is, look, I know to some people also that there's this, they like to put lights on, and they like to have optics, and they like to have all of this, and it looks sexy, right? But here's the thing. Again, build your firearm, do it with intent, right? So if you're going to be using a long gun and you're like, okay, this is the environment that I see myself operating in, let that environment or that idea to some degree dictate what you're going to do and as far as what you're going to put on that rifle or that platform or the handgun, right? If you're going to use something for home defense, it may be worth actually putting a flashlight on there. If you feel that you're going to be hitting targets out to 200 yards or 300 yards or even closer, maybe an optic is right for you. But you don't have to put an IR on it. You don't have to put all of this other stuff on there that otherwise would not be feasible to your potential environment. Now, that may change, but I think Mark can kind of attest to a lot of these points here too. Like, don't overcomplicate things. Understand what your environment is that you're going to operate in, and then set it up for that. And I do believe that there is, you can build a fairly general purpose rifle for most things, and then be able to adapt it to whatever situation you need when the time comes. Mark, do you have anything to put on that?
I do, but I'm going to let Paul kind of respond first, if Paul's got anything to add to it.
Yeah, good. The thing I did have a point to make. All those optics, lights, they all require batteries. So if your batteries die, you need to know how to use your weapon without them.
100%.
That was just my point.
Yep. It's a very valid point.
That's kind of actually going into what I was going to say, and I'm going to transition it in my statement, piggybacking what Paul said, to go into the next section, which is moving. So I always liken this to a GPS. So great. There's a great piece of technology. And if you can take advantage of it, but realize, there's all kinds of areas or points of failure with this piece of technology. If the satellite, are you plus or minus 5 meters? Well, if you're doing so there's times where you're 25 meters off, or again, I already made the reference to your vehicle GPS takes you all around the city when you were a block away from it to begin with. And my point of this, and it kind of goes to what Paul just said. So it's technology, it's fallible, it's batteries, it requires an energy source. So in our larger conversation, every time you're going through a battery, you have to have new batteries to replace it. And that's all weight and cube, and it adds up. And some people had made some great comments while you guys were talking. And my final thing is, again, on the GPS, great. You've got a GPS, a device. And this kind of goes to what you were saying too, Jeremy. I can look at this device and it keeps telling me to go this direction. And that's all I do. I just focus on the device and I just follow the arrow, what it's telling me to do. Move a little bit left, move a little bit right. And I've lost everything else. And so once this battery or once this device is dead, the satellites go away, I don't have any more power source for it, or it's off by 50 meters because of some weird magnetic thing. But I didn't even take that second to look around me. And I don't have a single map. I don't know how to use a compass. I don't know what the stars and the sun mean or any that. Well, then, you've really just, to Jeremy's point, I think, great. You've got all these cool bells and whistles and you can shoot. Maybe you can shoot fucking awesomely with all that. So you got a PEC 15, you got an EOTech with a IR source and all this stuff. But the moment that's all gone and you've got to go back to iron sights, you don't even know what your zero is.
Yep.
That's kind of my point, right?
Yep.
So these are nice things to have.
Yeah.
What is this? You can't shoot an azimuth to a sounder light with a Jeep. Yeah. Damn right. Montana. No, exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. Exactly. So and intersection, resection. I mean, so we're kind of jumping in. I want to get into the move. I mean, we're almost at an hour, and that's fine. Again, we're training to standards. This is the last episode. It's probably going to be about an hour and a half, but Montana just brought up a great point. And that's kind of about the whole thing. We're moving into the move section. Before I go, it sounds like Redbeard, you've got one more thing to add.
Yeah, no. So in all of these things, fitness plays a factor. So
thank you.
Look, you're going to have some people that are just like, oh, like that, this gun is too heavy, or there's this, or there's that. It's like, well, like, I hate to be that guy, but like, look, if a rifle, which is, and I'm not arguing the fact that there's some heavy rifles out there, but look, if 7 to 10 pounds on a rifle is going to be heavy for you, you really think you're going to be able to traverse even a 6-pound rifle or a 7-pound rifle, miles or kilometers, so along with your loadout and stuff like that? Like, dude, like the only way that becomes a non-point is get out there, get fit, and train with your stuff. Like that. I mean, I hate to be that person, but like, you got to put the reps in, dude. Like, you have to condition yourself for this stuff. It's not going to get any lighter just because you want it to. So,
hey, so Paul, before we come to you, I'm going to throw myself under the bus to what Redbeard just said. So for everybody watching, and whether you're live with us now or if you watch this in the future, see this later, I'll throw myself under the bus. The physical fitness required, again, you might have, and if you are wearing a plate carrier and a chest rack, and then you've got maybe, 80 pounds of gear in a rucksack. I mean, there's been times where I easily had 100 to 120 pounds of gear on my body. Like it's really difficult to maintain, even when you're at peak fitness. I'm not there anymore. Believe me, I'm old and broken. And that's where I'm going with this. To Jeremy's point. So I used to have a Benelli M4 shotgun, semi-automatic shotgun. I know that platform very well. It's
a workhorse,
freaking awesome, but it's also big and heavy and cumbersome. And with my back, that is no longer the right tool in the toolbox for me when it comes to how I need to use that tool or what that tool is used for. So without getting into it, I talked to these guys before, and they've kind of, when we were doing a pregame, I've gone to a different platform as a result of that. Because if you go back to episode 1, you have to be brutally honest with yourself. I cannot, if I could carry 3 weapons, one's going to be a long gun, a shotgun, and a handgun. Well, that Benelli is no longer going to be the shotgun I carry because it's just too big. It's too heavy. I can't maneuver it the same way I used to because I'm old and broken. I mean, it just is what it is. So suck it up, buttercup, and move on and find something else that, to Jeremy's point, that I'm more physically capable of maintaining and being able to be proficient with. Doesn't matter if I'm a second slower or, I don't have maybe the same reach or the same punch, kinetic energy. Can I actually, is this something that I'm going to be able to efficiently and repetitively do, with a high degree of success? That's what I have to ask myself now.
And I want to say, great point, Montana. Fitness is wildly important.
Damn right. Yeah, EMPs kill zero. I like this guy. I like this guy. Yeah, EMPs kill zero. Damn right. Yeah. Yep. Last I checked, no one's been killed by an EMP yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. All right. Good on you, Montana. Nice point. All right, moving on. All right, here we go. Movement. So here's part of movement. I mean, I'm not joking. This is something I had to do. I mean, dude, you got to look at this kind of stuff, so how are you going to maneuver? And so you can see in the slide deck, the reason I threw it in there is like, don't forget animal power. Do you remember the days where like the whole world moved on horses? Like these things still exist. Mules, donkeys. This shit still exists. Don't forget about that. I think everybody thinks movement is a Toyota Battelle or a Toyota Hilux or, a Razor, and all this kind of cool high speed, Mad Maxy kind of shit. Well, yeah, but most likely it's going to be your leg personnel carriers, your boots. Maybe you've got a bicycle with like a little bicycle pull behind thing, or it's going to be, an animal. I mean, how are you going to move? How are you going to effectively carry over 100 pounds and, every day? Because you're going to be foraging, maybe you're going to be grabbing stuff out of houses or abandoned vehicles, or maybe you're going to kill a deer. What are you going to do? Just take one of the hindquarters and leave all the rest of that meat behind you? No, hell no, you're not going to do that stuff, right? If you're moving to your next destination, you're going to need that protein. So you're going to have to ask yourself, how are you going to move? Period. And then part of moving is, well, how do you even know how to get from point A to point B? And that'll come up in the next slide. But before we go any further, comments from you guys on this so far?
If Paul wants to take it.
Paul coming in. Yep.
Yeah. I would say that I've, made sure that I have a bike. Okay. Just in case, I know there was a mention of an EMP and while the odds are low, if there's nothing else and everything else that I have is gone, I have the bike. Now, going back to what Jeremy said, riding that bike in a hilly area without being in good shape, I need to do some work. So I realize that. So I need to, do this every day. And Big Spoon mentioned something about wearing body armor and a duty belt every day. Those type of things will go a long way, carry that extra weight, because then if you don't have it, typical fitness stuff will go a long way.
Yeah.
And ammo weight. We talked about the weight of the rifles and the guns, but what about ammo? That's heavier.
Yep.
So, if you're going to carry that,
Right.
Well, and the same thing with like water and food,
right?
Water weighs water weighs a lot, you're going to carry 5 gallons of water. That's 40 pounds. How are you going to do that? That's 5 gallons. Think about your need. It's you and 3 other people, 5 gallons, and you're going to try to walk 10 miles a day, and you're not going to consume all 5 gallons of water. So to Paul's point, and then Jeremy's point on the fitness, well, then maybe you need to go back to see the previous episodes. Maybe you should just have a Katadine bottle, and you can just, again, if you live in northern Minnesota, there's tons of creeks and streams and, anything where you can get water, and you can just drink it right out of your Katadine filtration bottle. And then you don't have to carry, 40 pounds of water. Yeah. But if you're in the desert and you finally come across a water source, are you going to just abandon that? No, you're going to figure out, was it Mad Max, or something like, he's trying to they're squeezing the water. No, it was the fuel. It wasn't water, but he was like, trying to get the fuel into a kerchief and squeezing it into like a dirty, hat or something. You're going to be doing that. You're going to need to figure out how you're going to carry all that stuff. And that's movement, plain and simple. It is. And to your point, Paul, some things weigh a whole hell of a lot more than other things. And you might have to then, make a determination based on your environment, your physical capabilities, the threat you're up against, all these other things. Again, go back and see the previous episodes. You're going to have to take those in consideration. You're going to probably have to make some hard decisions. Redbeard?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I'm going to go off of on here, and I'll actually be really interested to hear both Mark and Paul's perspective when I'm done. But the first one is the environment dictates a lot. So Paul brought up a really good point. There's a difference in how we're going to perceive rural areas versus like urban areas. And I would say that as it pertains to movement in urban areas, while you have the potential to have more concealment, there's also more potential for somebody to be concealed watching you. So you have to be mindful of different things in urban areas as opposed to rural areas. There's little nuances or things that change with that given environment. Now, that being said, and because I don't want to rabbit hole that too much, but I think Mark and Paul will be able to further elaborate on that. But I want to talk about gear in fitness just one more time as it pertains to movement, because a lot of people think about gear, they think about what they're going to carry, but movement, in my point, is also mobility, our ability to move in that gear, right? And I'm going to provide a couple quick examples. So the first example is going to be a bag. Okay, so it's nothing crazy. This is a bag that I carry quite often. It's not filled to the hilt, but it has a lot of what I need in it. Now, it's a bag. It sits on the back, obviously. It's not overly cumbersome, but it does deny some bit of movement, albeit maybe not as much as others. So you have to think of how you're going to move, how you're going to shoulder something, how you're going to be able to reach for things in that bag. Another consideration.
Well, Dave, before you go any further, just real
Yeah.
quickly, no, I like where you're going. I didn't know you were going to do this, but so it's your range of motion. And the moment
Yep.
you start throwing, rucksacks over rucksacks, and you've got straps over straps, well, that impedes your shoulder stock weld, if you're going to have to bring a long gun up, right? So you have to learn how you're, and that actually might change your zero, your or you have to figure out a way to get that buttstock in more closer to your sternum, and then kick that shoulder strap out a little bit more onto the clavicle. Yeah, it's a damn good point that I don't think people, because if you've never fired a weapon while wearing all this stuff, you really don't know how this impacts. Right. And then look, and if it's, and if your first shot is a miss and the other guy is more squared away and his isn't, well, great. So what is the gunslinger? Great, you're fast, but I'm accurate.
Right.
Right. I didn't see that last one. Spoon, can you pull that up just real quickly? Yeah. It's small. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, new Wrangler. Yeah. So going to his point, though, I think where you're going is no matter, even if you're in great physical shape, you try to keep that as minimum as possible. Right.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Keep going. Sorry.
No. And so another example, which a lot of people do it this way, but a plate carrier. Now I have different stuff. It does change from time to time, depending on what I'm trying to train for specifically. But, in the end of the day, a plate carrier, depending on the type of plate carrier, can be cumbersome. It mitigates mobility, like Mark was saying.
Hang on, I'm sorry to say, there's no depending on. It is cumbersome.
Yeah,
they're all cumbersome, dude. So you're throwing weight, dude. They're all cumbersome.
Well, and to that point, it's like you do have some where the straps are a little more minimal. They kind of, they kind of have a better allowance, but not much, right? And so that's the other thing too. Like Mark was saying, like, look, unless you're out there and you're shooting with it, in the end of the day, like, you're not going to know how that dynamic is. It's the same, dude. It's the same thing with a helmet, right? You're not going to know how stressful that is on your neck, on your head, and all of and even your back to some degree. If you don't wear it for a certain duration of time, which can hinder your movement.
Before you go any further, I just got to throw in two things. We've just Spoons brought up a couple comments from some people watching, and I just want to those gentlemen or guys or gals, whoever. But great points. I mean, one of the last one was, everybody thinks military and plate carriers. Yeah, this right here, Montana and all.
Yep.
Yeah, they are. They're heavy and they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You really do lose mobility. I mean, Jeremy and I have talked about this offline numerous times. And I think he said he has a JanSport. I still have this Kelty that I have a Kelty rucksack that I would carry, that's way better than any of the military stuff. And that's why I was using it. So thanks to Montana Null and the other gentleman or I think it was a gentleman for the comments, but really good points. Right. And then my final thing before you go into the battle belt. So I've done 12-hour, basically whole period of darkness operations with not just with the Mitch helmet. Well, it's right over there now. Right. But that, and with a battery pack on the back, so for extended, and then the nods. Oh, you're absolutely right, man, dude.
Yeah.
The like, what that does to your neck muscles and the
Oh,
migraine
yeah.
and everything you get, and then looking
Yep.
under nods for that period of time, dude. That kicks your ass. New Wrangler. We
Right.
can't have plates in Canada. They don't want us outfitted to survive. They want to walk over. Well, so New Wrangler. I mean, go see our previous episodes. I mean, maybe a plate carrier is what you need and what you're planning for, what your thoughts are. I think what we're kind of going in with this is, and I think Jeremy's kind of trying to bring this out. It's like, maybe it is what you want, but if it is what you want, you better then start preparing and prepping and wearing it and training in it. I think that's the point we're trying to make here.
Yeah.
Not saying that you don't need one. That's not my point. I don't know your scenario or what your thought process is, but going back to the other gentleman, freedom of movement, Misha's just saying that. And I think that's what the other guy said too. It's like mobility, back in the day, it used to be a 3 to 5 second rush. I'm up, he sees me, I'm down. And, that's what you're doing. Now it's, everybody thinks it's like, shit. I remember being in a foreign country that again had lots of up and down, and I'm watching all these regular Army guys doing shit. And like, we actually came to mission once because they couldn't get into the support by fire position for us because dude, it's not even their fault. It is incredibly physically demanding, especially if you're new and you've not been in country, you're working at altitude, and now you're doing this shit. And our light infantry forefathers, when I started in the 80s, like you knew every ounce. You knew exactly. I remember like doing patrols and like one canteen came out and it was passed all the way through the whole squad. And now I knew I had, 15 canteens left, so I could do the weight calculation and the water and all that. Yeah, no, it's now guys are wearing like, 50 pounds on their body, just on their body, not even their rucks and stuff. It's like, it's crazy. So.
Yep. Yeah. Just on
sorry,
a final
Redbeard.
note.
Sorry, we kind of digress going to the battle belt. Yeah, and then let's move on. All right.
I just wanted to just point this out. Like, so I actually stripped this one. I'm going to be kind of rebuilding how in resetting this up. But something like this, and I think Mark can attest to this. This is great for whether you're going to go hiking, whether you're doing like a longer range type thing with a chest rig. This is lighter. It provides you more mobility. It provides a lot of great things that you probably don't need. More than likely, you won't need a plate carrier for. So I think a battle belt or a fighting belt is fantastic to have. And quite frankly, I'm going to be getting a chest rig because there's a lot more inherent pluses in many ways to a good chest rig and a good belt system than there is having to lug a plate carrier all the time. On a final note to that, again, kind of coming back around, read your environment, figure out what your environment is that you're operating in, whether it's urban, whether it's rural, and be able to devise like a strategy of what you're going to do and what you want to take with you, because that is going to affect the maximum amount of movement and mobility. So, and mobility is life. So.
Well, so that is going to be my final comment. There's like everybody has to, for this, and it'll come to Paul for final comments, and we'll move on to the next section. But, we're talking movement here. Each and every one of you, each and every one of us have to go through our own mathematical equation, figure out, what do we think is going to happen? What is it that you're preparing for? Why do you want this bag in the first place? Going all the way back to episode 1, Paul had a great point. You might want multiple bags because you're in multiple different scenarios. I'm at work, I'm in my vehicle, I'm at home. It could be this, it could be that, natural disaster, EMP, you've got to, you and only you can figure that out for yourself. But I think to Jeremy's point, and we've seen already some comments. Thank you for everybody leaving great comments and comments to what we're talking about, plus your own personal observations. And I think everybody's on the same sheet of music. Like, you've got to be physically fit, and mobility is king. Like, if you can't move, you're dead. Plain and simple. I mean, it just really kind of boils down to that. Paul, before we move on, you got anything to add, sir?
Well, to add on to what Jeremy finished up with. Tools like a Silcock key will help you in an urban environment. If you need to, you go to a big store somewhere where they have a water line there and you can get some water. You're not going to be able to use that outside there, but if you're in an urban environment, it may help you. I'm not saying it will, and you may get yourself in trouble too. So just be careful. And as far as some of the comments here, I think we need to get the new Wrangler a ticket. to come over here and vote for the U.S.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, New Wrangler's been making some great comments there. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So,
Everybody's been killing it today.
Oh, that was weird. Why did it take that view? Oh, I hadn't seen that yet. No.
Oh,
Hey,
boy.
Jeremy, you're running the show. There we go. All right. All right. Hey, moving on. Let's go into the next slide. We're at Spoon just gave me a heads up. So again, if everybody's watching, if you haven't seen the previous ones, I can't see what everybody else is seeing because I'm in a different view, so I can kind of do the slides and stuff. But I did just see a private chat from Spoon saying that we're at an hour 15. Yep. So yeah, we'll kind of move on here. Again, we're, it's to standards, not to time, but we don't want to go too long because we know it's kind of late and, everybody can watch us afterwards. So here's the only other thing. We've kind of already done this, so I don't need to, belate, to just not berate, but to drag this out too much more. But you look at this. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're moving, you've already heard me say this ad nauseum in every one of the other modules. Every time, everything you're carrying, the moment you use that thing, there's a chance that thing now disappears. Now your weight will go down. That's possibly a good thing, but that also means you don't have that thing anymore, right? One is, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So factor that into your decision-making process when you're thinking about moving. So like Paul's example, if you're in an area where bikes and you could have a bike rig, and a little trailer, well, that's awesome. Then maybe you can carry more weight. If I'm out here in northern Minnesota and if I'm going to go north and try to link up with somebody up in Ely or where Spoon lives, I'm probably not going to be on the roads. I'm going to be out in the woods. I might actually be looking at a canoe or a kayak as my form of movement, right? So I can still carry more things, but you see where I'm kind of go with this. You've got to look at, what it is you're trying to do and how you're moving and how that's going to affect everything else that has to do it. I threw migration in there because depending on the time of year, I mean, think about your ability to procure food. If you are moving from point A to point B and you happen to know that a month from now, it's the caribou run or whatever it is, or the geese are going to be flying through, that might change or somewhat alter how you're going to go about your movement, your route recon or your route assessment. Because you might say, you know what, it's actually worth me staying here for 3 extra days because I know there's going to be a lot of geese flying through here. I'll be able to take them with my bow or with my, bird traps or with my shoddy. And that's a lot of extra protein I'm going to need along the way. So just throwing some other things out there. And then the final part about movement we're going to get into here, kind of feeds into the next slide, is, how are you going to communicate? I mean, and I'm being very serious. If my plan is, let's just hypothetically say I'm planning for some type of scenario where I'm going to have to bug out one, and I have no vehicle, so I'm going to be doing this on foot or on a bike or some form of conveyance like that. There's no mechanical, automotive capabilities anymore. And I'm going to go to Walker, Minnesota, where I'm going to meet up with my friends from Fog Firearms. Well, how long would that take? Is there things that I can do? Can I set up a commo plan with them before, like, so if we wake up tomorrow and suddenly there's no cell phones, and then after 6 hours, it becomes evident that we're in a really kind of effed up scenario, that they immediately go into some type of no comms comm plan, right? So this goes into signal and communicate. So before I go into that, guys, because that is part of movement, right? You might be having to like, hey, I've got 3 days to make it to here where I've got a cache. I already did a cache, a year ago, and that'll give me enough food and, whatever to go to the next cache, which will take me 3 days. And so I need to be at cache point number 3 within 14 days because they're going to be working that way towards me. And we're all going to link up at that point. And here's the things that we're going to do, because there's no comm stuff. We're going to talk about that in a second. Yeah. Montana, you're stealing my thunder, brother. I see. Yep. Primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. Yep. I used to do PACE plus, but so before we go into commo, do you guys see what I'm kind of saying? Because that is a part of movement. You got to be able to communicate with people and tell them what it is that you're doing and how you're moving. And some of that has to be maybe pre-planned if that's the scenario that you're preparing for. You might need to sit down and put in movement or commo or planning books, and everybody has a copy. And there's their routes. Here's my primary route. Here's my contingency route. Here's, as Montana just said, here's my 4 or 6 forms of communication, blah, blah, blah. All right. So that is me on a hilltop in a shitty place in the world. And you can see, I mean, I've got, headphones. There's that SATCOM I'm running, and then I'm talking on a satellite phone at the same time. Yeah, you got to have multiple forms of communication right there, right? So it's pretty obvious. Why do we want to communicate? I'll shut up. You guys take the slide. Everybody can read it, but what do you guys think? Why is communication important? And I actually want to come to Paul first, because this is really a lot of your wheelhouse from your background. Why is communication important, sir?
I would say number one, you can't do anything alone, right? I mean, if you're alone, it's possible, but it's better in numbers. So now when it comes to actual communications, I've tested devices over the years that, that you can use your cell phone, or you can use a GPS device, and, ham radio. There's so many different ways to communicate, but, as far as what can the average person utilize to communicate with everyone. And I still go back to the two-way walkie-talkies. If it's a small group and you're going to be close by, they will work. Radio waves will work. I believe. You never know, right? But some of the more advanced equipment out there, well, you can get this and you can plug it in and it connects your cell phone to a satellite, or it connects your cell phone to another device. Those things they're good, but they're not proven. And again, they rely on charging. So how are you going to recharge them? You have solar charging, and how well does it work? I've been charging one of those, it looks like a battery-sized charger, which it lasts forever. It's great. But today I had it out in the sun with one of those fold-out panels, 24% in one day to recharge that battery. Mm-hmm. So again,
hang on. You charge it all day and it only charged 24%?
24%. Now, I'm in a holler, so I have to keep moving it, those type of things. But I did make sure that I had it in there. But this is a big battery. You plug it in to the wall and it charges to 100%. That thing will last you multiple days uncharged, which one of the things you want to know is if your battery charger you have maintains a charge over a long period of time, like months, that's not a good quality battery. So I know that mine is not a good quality battery. They should self-discharge when they haven't been used for a while to maintain the quality of the battery. Just a heads up. So the one I'm using it works great for me, but if I had to judge it, I would say that it's lacking in some areas, and the recharge from solar is horrible.
Well, and but hang on, but I think I thought we were changing our whole economy over to solar, because solar is better for our carbon footprint. What? No, hang on. I got to bring it. You guys, are you serious? That's not true.
Disinformation.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I digress. We're trying to do this for real. Hey, we've had some really good comments coming in. I really appreciate everybody talking. And because I've got a solar charger, just like Paul's talking about. I've got a couple of those little packs that he's talking about. I've got one that's really good. But Paul, you bring up a great point. I think again, people don't even understand batteries half the time and how batteries work. And a good battery should be discharging. It shouldn't just be because what that really means is that type of battery Paul's talking about, it's going to have a really short lifespan once it actually starts working, or is being used. It's really just not going to last that long. The more convenient the means of commo, the less secure. Montana, here's the only place I'm going to maybe disagree with you on, because personal face-to-face commo, I mean, it is pretty insecure because, it could be eavesdropped and somebody could always tell the secret, but it is, I think, in my time, I'm an old school military guy. We used to actually practice this where you had runners, like a runner would go from one squad to another squad, or one platoon to another, because because as I think what you're getting at, and what Paul said too, is, we're using, back then, Prick 77s, it wasn't SATCOM and all that kind of high speed stuff. But, we were planning that the Russians, the Soviets were going to be jamming our comms. So we actually practiced with runners. So, I guess that's still to your point, but I think that actually is it is the most convenient and readily accessible is the face-to-face communication. Now, I don't want to sidetrack us here. Maybe I'll do this in a different video, but there's all kinds of ways that you can communicate. And if you're concerned about it, you can even do it over a phone in such a manner that, there's no one ever going to break your code, and you can talk openly and still communicate to the people on the other line. So there are definitely ways in which that personal, P2P, person to person communication can actually be very secure and very convenient. Unless, of course, Paul showing up my doorstep to tell me a message means we're all dead because, Paul just led, all the zombies to my house or something like that. That is a possibility, right? I know. I don't know why I'm picking on Paul. It's probably you, Redbeard, who would have done that. But all right, Redbeard, let's get back on track here. What do you want to add to that so far?
So actually, I'm going to go kind of off the beaten path, and it's going to be there's only just going to be a handful of things. Kind of like counter communication, but not in the traditional way. Communication is more than just verbal. It's more than electric. It's more than a lot of the traditional things. This kind of factors into movement, but your spore, if you are not conscientious of what you're leaving behind, you're communicating to people, okay, there's people this way. You don't have to be an expert tracker sometimes to leave a spore that's obvious. And for those who don't know what spore is, it's basically an indicator that, hey, somebody was here and they're within, or they were within the general vicinity. Another point that I want to make is that type of thing is not necessarily specific to rural. You can leave spore anywhere, whether it's rural, urban, whatever the case might be. Also, if you're cooking or if you have a fire, if people see smoke, they're going to be like, hey, whether you're intending to communicate that or not, people are going to see that. And they're going to be like, okay, well, there's something or someone potentially over here. Now, the one area that I really want to emphasize, though, is I would encourage people to look at emergency markings for search and rescue and responders are. Knowing how to mark on your doors or what to mark on hallways or areas of buildings or buildings
or just
in general.
Open fields. I mean, open fields. Don't forget that. If you're out in the woods and you're potentially lost or injured. Yeah.
So there's whether I don't know if it's specifically oil-based marker, but there are, and I actually have a PDF on my phone to show how to indicate this room is empty or this building is empty or there's X amount of people here or whatever. That stuff is great to know because that also helps you establish a form of communication that unless somebody knows what they're looking at, they might not know you're there, but your people might know you're there. So long as you have some form of communication like that. So when I think of communications, I don't necessarily think of electronic. I think of things that speak without actually having to speak, if that makes sense.
Nope. And so you just saw Spoon. Montana one-time pads. Montana, I'm here to say one-time pads suck. I mean, it's really not a fun way of doing things. Having been,
you seem kind of pumped about it though.
But and then Spoon brought up ciphers, and and Redbeard, what you're ultimately going to, is the same type of thing. So there definitely are. I mean, so there's verbal and nonverbal communications. There's different ways to do it. And again, I just mentioned books. I mean, you're talking. You can even get into like there are very legitimate set. Here's an X. This something in this segment means one thing. Something here means another. You could create that own pattern within your 100%. Own group and leave your own signals. And and no one but you guys would ever know it. Even if you Montana, like talking about one-time pads, it's the same type of concept. I mean, it really is. And you can do the same thing with books. And, so as long as everybody has the same edition book and the same book, it's almost unbeatable. No one's ever going to be able to crack that code. So, verbal, nonverbal communications, there's lots of different ways that you can do it. And I think, because again, now we're kind of getting to things that could actually go into their own classes on this further discussion. But to bring it back to where we're talking about here, the ultimate point is, why are you trying to communicate? What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And I think everybody who's watching and all three of us acknowledge, you have to have figured this out beforehand. Yeah. You can't figure this out once there's no longer a cellular service, right? You have to talk to each other and figure this out within your group, your family. Look, I'll even say this here. I'm going to bring it back to us. So here's another thing about communications, right? So you just saw here, and maybe bring the slide back up. Sorry, I'll just bring it to you, Jeremy. So,
Yep.
so you see here, we're talking, why do you want to do it? Because safety, emergency, coordinating efforts, planning, organization, or reorg, information gathering, intelligence. These are just some of the reasons why you might want to communicate. Well,
Right.
part of that is also personal defense, right? In
Yep.
planning. Look, so there's a couple cool science fiction movies, if you're into this stuff, where that science fiction writer realized what we're all talking about, and the cast of characters in that person's science fiction world have other, nonverbal communication ways of doing, whether it's hand signals, whether it's, looks, eye movements, and they're communicating to the other person in their party, danger, this person's lying, or, press forward, whatever it is. There is nothing, and actually now that I'm thinking about it, I've even seen some more modern, like kind of cop show movies where some of the individuals, the cast of characters, are doing these types of, non-personal, non-verbal communications, and they're communicating things. And again, anybody watching this, think about things when you've been with your spouse or your children or a friend, and something's not right, and you just shoot each other a certain look. Or, again, you could have it where I pull on my ear, or I, rub my nose, and that means danger, get prepared. Again, there are so many ways that you can work these type of clues, these signaling, techniques into, seriously,
Yep.
sign language. Learn some basic frickin' sign language. It's one of the things I've always wanted to do. I really want to learn sign language because it's another way of communicating. I do love languages, but it's also like, if the three of us could learn a few different signs, whatever it is, what are the odds anybody else in the world even knows what the hell we're talking about? It would be incredibly low, and an incredibly low probability that somebody would interpret, correctly what we were just all saying just with our hands. Yep. We could be doing it in front of everybody, and they'd be like, okay, those guys are communicating in a way that none of the rest of us understand. Exactly.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? So communication is really key. It's really huge. I don't want to beat it to death, but it needs to be really emphasized. Yeah, there's a lot to communication, and we're not even going to do it justice here tonight, period. All right, you guys want to add to that at all? Did I beat that sufficiently to death?
I think we've drowned the horse at the watering hole.
Paul?
I would say the one thing to note is if you are using your phone and it's compromised with malware, it opens the door. So if you're using a specific device designed for communication, it's a different story. But if you're using your Apple or Android, just be aware that even if it's encrypted, if your phone's compromised, so is your conversation.
So you're touching on a subject very dear to my heart because of my background. Do you want to take a couple seconds? I think it's worth it. Again, we're fine on time, but do you want to expand upon that a little bit? Like, in other words, my point would be, and I think you'll do a much better job of it without getting me in trouble. If you're relying on your cell phone for anything, you're already screwed. You want to expand upon that?
I absolutely agree. Every single app you have installed most likely has some kind of permissions to access what you do. And even if you lock it down, it still has access, right? So every app you install can see, you give it permission. It asks for it, you give it to it. You can block it, but maybe you block notifications. Okay, notifications, that's a good thing for your personal experience, but that doesn't impact where they get access to the data. When you download and install that, it has you agree to some agreement that says, I agree to share my information with you. So you may install, an app that has to do with weather, and it's going to go ahead and track everything you do on the internet. It could track your text messages. It can track your email. If you happen to download something malicious and you don't even know about it, it doesn't ask you. So then you will have there's a recent one for Android phones where it can actually see the screen and do captures. So if you type in a password and you're not using a password app where it masks it and you only see the asterisks on there, and you type the letters out and they see it, they now have your password. They can get to all that stuff. And I think the article I read, it was like 60,000. So it's not a tremendous amount, but 60,000 phones had this installed. That's what they know about. So yeah, your phone can be absolutely compromised whether it's malicious or not. Right?
Yep. So I'm glad you actually said that. Yep, Montana. Again, another good point. You have no idea what's going on in the background. So for what it's worth, before we move into the next section, I mean, phones are death in the world I came from. My most recent, adult life. Phones are death. I mean, they will get you killed. I mean, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So we'll move on.
It's like having a computer in your hand.
Damn right. Technology. Like, so again, going back to old school where, and we've had some people making some great comments here tonight. Yeah. So start thinking about that. If you in your mind think that whatever it is that you're planning for, maybe, well, again, I actually like Paul's comment. Like, I've got a couple Motorola, little walkabout push to talks. I probably should up my game into some, there's some other, reasonably priced systems like that. None of that stuff is going to be encrypted. But at that point in time, is that really what you're worried about? Because if that's the scenario you're playing into, okay, yeah, I mean, and then you got to talk about radio wave propagation and all these other, variables and factors. If it's, wet environment, dry environment, all these mountainous, flat, a whole bunch of different variables come into play. So it's not just as simple as like, well, I've got a radio. But at the end of the day, what we're doing right now and these things right here, they might work to some extent, but they're also going to be the things that potentially could be your demise. So just be careful. That's all, right? So we just kind of already did this. See, so, again, and then I just kind of want to bring it. So I just even did it right there. Well, here, last thing I'll just say there, if you look at the environmental considerations, what I'm talking about that is, so think about non-electronic ways of communicating with each other, whistles, signal flares. Hey, remember the Civil War where, or even the Navy where they use flags over distances? Hey, if technically speaking, you're looking at 12-mile horizon. If these are the fires of Gondor and every 10 miles there's a fire thing, you light a fire and then a guy 10 miles away sees it and he lights a fire and then somebody 10 miles from him sees it. There are other ways of communicating. And what I kind of want to just bring up here is like, you've got to take that in consideration. We already just talked about it. Great. You've got push to talks, but you're in a very swampy area with mountainous, terrain on the flanks. Well, it's really going to hinder the range or the ability of your device to communicate. Look at other alternative means. Like Jeremy and I have talked about this many times. And here, I just realized I'll throw a plug in for something Spoon and I did. Hey, Spoon, how many years ago was that when we did that emergency signal? 5 years ago? So was that? Yeah. So on Centerline Systems about 5 years ago, we did a couple videos on emergency signal, and it goes into what we're talking about right now. So, think about, again, I'm moving towards, our rally point. Jeremy, left his place, 2 days after me, but he knows to travel to this general corridor, a valley or whatever. And then he's going to move north. And then he starts seeing, my marking tape flags, or maybe I make a different marker going to go. We're talking about, like, I put some, logs on the ground or whatever the case may be. There's other ways that you can do this. So you've got to take your environment and the terrain into consideration in your commo and figure out how you're going to make that work in your benefit. Seriously, signal mirrors. If Jeremy lived 10 miles away and there was a mountaintop, if we had, look, that's how, I mean, there's places like that in Duluth. I could go probably 2 miles from here. And if Jeremy was in downtown Duluth, I could actually signal to him with a signal mirror. So, and that's what, over on the road, that's probably, an 18-mile drive. Right. But line of sight, because my elevation and where the port is. I mean, Jeremy on a good day, if it was overcast, if the environment was working against us, he wouldn't see this. But on a good day, Jeremy and I could be communicating with signal mirrors. So there's no radio waves. There's no cell phone signal that could be intercepted. There's none of that stuff, unless you were somewhere just barely off the line of sight, you're not even going to see us signaling to each other. So think about that stuff. That's all I'm trying to throw out there. And then, and going back to, I think it was Montana, one of the other people brought up pace at the very beginning. My final point here on commo is primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. And when I was doing this for real, I threw in 2 more forms of communication. I had 6 forms of communication because it was my life, right? I kind of wanted to come home with my skin, and not be on some snuff film, being executed. So primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. And then if you can, throw in a few more. Hey, dude, if you can do it, why not throw in a few more ways to communicate? Because as somebody else said, communication is incredibly vital to your survivability and your long-term survivability and security. So you guys want to add anything to the slide? Otherwise, I'm going to move forward.
Yeah, I think I'm good on my end.
Paul, you got
say,
something?
Yeah, for one thing, absolutely practice your communications plans ahead of time. I think that's obviously been stated there. And the second thing is, if you're concerned about tracking and other things with your cell phones, don't kill them. Just get a Faraday bag. It's not about protection from EMPs at this point. It's privacy. Put it in a Faraday bag. Test the Faraday bag. Make sure it does not have Bluetooth working through the bag. I've had those, and it happens. You want to get rid of those. Make sure that it at least blocks Bluetooth, and then you'll know that it works for everything else. But that way you can keep your phone. If you can charge it down the road, it's not a tracking device at that point, we think. It's always possible, but I do believe that's the best you can do. And then you at least have that device with you down the road if you can charge it and use it to communicate later.
Well, and so I'm glad you just said it, because another thing, we were kind of like moving through this maybe perhaps a little too quickly, but to Paul's point, think through the conditions and think through the if you do this, it'll get you in trouble, or this is what's going to get you burnt. This is what's going to get you killed. It's the same thing. If, Jeremy and I are going to communicate, like, if we set up a commo plan beforehand, and every Wednesday, we're going to, do a signal fire, and, if I'll see his signal fire, he sees mine, and we know we're okay. And if I don't see his, then, the next day I'll try it again, because that's our contingency, right? Okay, maybe he was just busy that day and didn't get there in time, or maybe his wood was all wet. So I'll give it 24 hours. And then, that next day I see his fire. And if I don't see it, then I start movement, and I start moving over to Jeremy's to make sure him and his family are okay. Well, just be considered, just like Paul's saying, well, other people can see that fire. Or if you're using a whistle, like that can be heard, and again, distance, water, terrain, all of this stuff affects how you hear things, how you see things, and go out and start educating yourself on this. So again, we're not teaching this class, but if you're looking uphill or if you're looking downhill, I'll just pose this question to you. If you're looking downhill, do things appear closer or farther away? And if you're looking uphill, do things appear closer or farther away? You've got to get out and practice this stuff. It's kind of the same thing that Paul just said, is like, know your equipment. The Faraday bag, put it in there. Oh shit, I can still get Bluetooth. Okay, well, that's not a good Faraday bag. It's the same thing. You've got to get out there, and you've got to operate in this environment, and you've got to test things out. And there's no substitute for actually firsthand experience and going out there and rehearsing it and practicing it. Plain and simple. Yep. All right, moving on, guys.
Yep.
All right, medicate. I'm going to bring this full screen. So that's pretty horrible. I probably weighed like 168 pounds. I was living on MREs and goat meat. And look, you can look at my rib cage. It's horrible. So I love bringing this slide up because, again, kind of what Jeremy and I, and Paul's kind of new to our little conversations, but he's on board too. It's like, oh, so you're just going to grab a rucksack and walk out in the woods and do what? Like, I probably look like something in one of those damn Survivor programs. That's what those guys look like, Yeah, dude, I was emaciated, dude, this shit, whatever you think it is, that's going to happen, is going to kick your ass. And you got to be in shape, and you got to have food. Otherwise you're going to look like that idiot right there. Right. So bringing it back to us, it seems to be a weird perspective. What just happened there? All right, there we go. Right there. So medicate. So when we talk about medicate, we're going to sit and talk a little bit about trauma, combat-based medicine. But the reason I use that slide first is, imagine you're that emaciated. You've not had food, your protein, your body's going to start shutting down. And anything from, like, most people forget this. We already talked about foot maintenance, but foot maintenance, oral hygiene, these are the things that can kick your ass and no one ever talks about. You've got to take this into consideration when it comes to the Medicate. It isn't just, okay, I know how to use an Osherman, I can do a tourniquet, I can do, I can intubate somebody. Okay, that's awesome. You do need to know those medical skills, but you also need to keep your teeth clean, your feet and good, and any cut you have, you better have some way of making sure it doesn't get infected, because a simple infection If you're on your 30-day march, you know, from my house to your house to link up, and you get an infection, you might not make it another 7 days. I mean, that's just the basic reality of wilderness survival, wilderness medicine. And so that's when I wanted to throw it there right there. What do you guys want to add to that kind of stuff? Oh, shit, I just saw the bottom. Yeah. What about pediatric or gender specific? I mean, like, is it just you, tough guy, or do you have a wife and kids? You know, what are you going to do then? Right. How does that work out?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that I could add to this, Mark, and it's actually going to it's going to take the realm of preventative and into day to day, which is, again, here I am harping on the idea of physical fitness. Go work out, like eat right, because if your body beforehand is in an advantageous position, meaning you have mobility, you have strength, you have conditioning, you're capable, that's an injury mitigator. And to me, when we look at mitigating injuries, one of the biggest types of injuries that you mitigate through conditioning, through strengthening, through all of these things is mechanical injuries. Mechanical injuries can be some of the dumbest things in the world, but they can take you completely out of the fight. They can keep you out of traversing terrain and require not just a couple hours, but can require days, weeks, or even a month or more of rest time. I would say that falls into, daily physical fitness and maintenance falls into that day-to-day medication regimen, which is, which is going to the gym or doing something that's going to provide you some type of a physical improvement, if you will. I'm a huge advocate for prevention, which leads into mitigation. So if you're not doing everything you can to put yourself into an advantageous situation, if you're not fit, you're going to I will argue head over heels that if you are not fit, you're going to have a shitty time when it comes to a catastrophic injury or even a mechanical injury. There's more than enough data in civilian medical studies that show that people who are of ill health, who have vices such as smoking, alcohol, or have weight issues or whatever the case might be, are at a disadvantage and may require more resources for medical care than those who eat healthier, who are active, and who take care of themselves. And I wanted to really put that out there because it does factor into this Medicaid area.
Paul?
I agree with you, Jeremy, 100%. It's just some of us get to the point in life when we're older, and it's just not.
That's not fair. Right? I'm being ganged up on.
No. I agree with you too.
No. I was talking. Did you see Spoon's comment? Spoon said,
okay. I see that.
Okay. I thought you guys were laughing about that. I was like, this suddenly became unfair.
No, so I agree with Jeremy. You know, in my earlier, younger, whatever years, that was the best thing for me. I was in great shape and I didn't have any problems whatsoever. You know, you get a sports injury or something, it sets you back, and then 10 years later, you're overweight and you're trying to recover from there. You have to recover from that. Just do your best to stay in decent shape the best you can with your diet and all that kind of stuff. Now, back to medications. There are plenty of companies out there that I would recommend that will get you your basic meds that we can't get every day. Right? They'll do it online, and they're absolutely great. I don't know why we're not developing more advanced antibiotics, but that's another story. So, but what about chronic things like asthma, diabetes, other chronic things? What are you going to do? You can't carry that. You can carry some of it, but for how long? Do you have a doctor that you can communicate with down the road? There's nothing you can do physically to prepare yourself for that.
No, hey, so I thought you had a great point. I mean, like, when you start talking about, diabetes and it's the same thing, like in an EpiPen. So I've got one EpiPen. I'm not allergic to, bee stings and that kind of stuff, but I have an EpiPen. I don't think you can even get your hands on an EpiPen right now for are they still like $300 each? But
Yeah, they're expensive because my dad just had to get a couple of them, and they're like $200-300 a pop.
Yeah. Yeah. So to Paul's point, and there's a bunch of companies, and maybe when we post this, and it's live right now, but when I post this, I know there's a matter of fact, I think Black Scout Survival works with a company where you can reach out to them and get the meds that you're talking about. So I'm lucky. I still got a bunch of 800 milligram Motrins. I vacuum sealed that shit. I don't care if like, oh, they expired, 10 years, like they're still 800 milligram Motrins, and I'm going to keep those things because if I ever need them, people have thrown oxycodone at me and all that kind of shit for my back. I didn't take a single one of those things, but I'm going to keep that stuff because in a real world, no shit, grid down, whatever type of scenario, to Paul's point, there's a lot of meds that you should be thinking about, and as the slide said, if you saw it, and it goes to, pediatric, it goes into gender specific. I mean, there's a lot of things when it comes to meds that you really should be thinking about. And now I'm going to take it in a slightly weird direction, not to take away from what you just said, Paul, but maybe to kind of play into what Jeremy might say. But what about the holistic, or maybe holistic is the wrong way of saying it. What about the natural? I mean, like, again, I know one of my shortcomings right now is I don't know enough about foraging. I don't know enough about the botanicals around me. And I really want to get better. Like, could this, I'm just making this up, like, could this, cedar bark, if I boiled it with some birch tree, you see what I'm getting at? That actually will help me, deal with my high blood pressure or my diabetes or whatever your issue is. I think to Paul's point, that was my takeaway from your statement, sir, is like, yeah, we all need to know that stuff and either be prepared for it and plan ahead and reach out to those companies that can give you those meds, so you can have them in case of an emergency, or you've got to then figure out how nature can provide the next closest or the next best thing, or maybe an even better alternative than the meds.
So to quickly add to that, Mark, not in all cases, but in many cases, typically the remedies to stuff like stinging nettle or other poisonous type plants exist within the plants themselves. The biggest thing is understanding how to source that remedy, whether it's like poison oak or whatever the case might be. So right there, I don't know if that kind of factors in kind of into what you're saying too, as it pertains to herbal stuff, but dude, like, that nature is fantastic that way, to where there is something that like absolutely can freaking kill you. It also has the ability to cure you as well. Yeah. We see that with venomous and poisonous animals. Now, that's another thing. When we're talking about venom and poison, they're two totally different things. So they can't be considered the same. Medically, they're not the same. How they work, it's not the same. So understanding little things like that is extremely important. So yeah, but nature is fantastic, dude. It freaking, not only does it give you the ailment, but it provides typically the cure, or at least some type of remedy there. Yeah. So I love where you went with that.
Yeah, the antithesis or the anti-venom, right? And I don't know if you saw this when you were talking, but there was two great comments. Our new friend Montana said, "Yeah, I'm the same way. I know the tall ones are called trees." That was pretty good. Thank you, sir. That's awesome. And then we had Steve in here, and he made another great comment too. Yeah, keep extra meds for barding. No, Steve's absolutely right. You know, like even the things that you don't need, like, okay, I'm not a female. I don't need a tampon, but maybe you have, again, you got to figure it out for yourself. Like, look, tampons would be one of the first things I'm going to discard out of my packing list if I have to throw a rucksack and that's all I can carry is what's on my body. I'll get rid of that stuff, but well, okay. What about alcohol? I mean, let's be honest. There's a medicinal property to alcohol. I mean, both for a disinfectant, for, again, there's not going to be anesthesia at that point in time. So, you see where I'm kind of going this. So to each and every one, we have to figure this out for ourselves. I think, again, we're not wrapping this up, but just I'm personally feeling this was a great point to re-emphasize this. We don't have the answers for you. We're not saying get this bag and this thing, that because that's not true, right? That's just not how this is going to work. we're just trying to have this conversation to figure out, okay, well, can we actually think about the situation or the situations, the scenarios, the environment, and all these other considerations? And can we start opening up our mind to be, to be more considerate of other ideas? So, well, right over there in this little box, and, I didn't unpack it, but I probably have like 8 books that if it really was grid down and the world's ending, I'm taking those 8 books with me. I'm not taking the computer. I'm taking those 8 books because it's everything from shelter to, like we were just talking about now, foraging, plant life in northern Minnesota. I'm not joking. I have 2 books on the medicinal properties of plants from northern Minnesota because that's where we live. And if I'm going to carry at least one of those damn books, I'm probably not going to carry the book about, how to butcher a cow. I'm pretty sure I can figure it out. I will honestly admit I've never butchered a cow, but I've dressed a whole bunch of deer and grouse and all that stuff. Something tells me I'll figure it out and I'm not going to waste a lot of meat. You know what I'm saying? But there's other things that you should have in your hip pocket. Now, Paul, I got to look at this real quickly. Know your area of operation. No, exactly. Robert just left a comment. Robert, one of the things I've said for the longest time in my life, because it happened in real life, I'm like, you don't wait until you're in the middle of a crisis to start preparing for it. That is an actual real world thing that I'm not going to say what it was, but I guarantee you guys all know what I'm talking about if I said it, because before it happened, I was saying this to people. I'm like, you don't wait until we're in the middle of a crisis to prepare for it. We need to be preparing for this right now. And no one wanted to listen to me, and then shit fucking went south and people died. But I digress. But so again, to Paul's point, if you can figure out how to have this or a small laptop like what I'm using here, like for these podcasts, and if I can have this in a Faraday bag, and if I can have that information on here, and I could still use that solar panel, whatever, and I can pull this up, and maybe I get the information I need to how to find a natural cure for a toothache or whatever it is, then that's worth looking into. I mean, everybody's got to figure that out for themselves. For me, I've got books for that stuff. And I've got a bunch of the medical things that we're talking about. I'm not joking. I even have stuff for toothaches because that's another thing that could potentially cripple and kill you in one of these type of scenarios. So when it comes to medicine and what you're going to put in your go bag, it isn't just, okay, I'm going to put an Osherman and an Israeli. Okay, maybe if you think it's going to be GSW and that kind of stuff, sure. But then what happens after you use that? How are you going to replenish it? Or is it just a short-term scenario that you're planning for? You, the individual, have to take that in consideration. You have to figure that out for yourself. What I think we've been trying to do in these last 3 episodes is just to try to, okay, well, if it's this, then what about that? And if it's this, then what about that? And if it's these other things, well, what about that stuff? That's what we're trying to do, is to try to really kind of get people to start thinking about this a little bit more. And I think the people who've been, joining us and talking in the last couple episodes, again, based even on the comments tonight, they know what the hell we're talking about. So, all right, Paul.
I would say that I read way too much, and I need to read way too much. But if there's something that I think is of value that I could take with me, especially when it comes to this type of topic, I have the paper copies. I have a lot of electronic books. I have more electronic books than I care to even think about. But paper, get a paper copy of whatever you want. If communications are cut off, you can have that. Second, Mark, to go with your thing with the tooth issue or dental issue, Orajel is not going to help you if you need a root canal. Okay. At that point, you're going to need an extraction. So you need a tool to remove a tooth. At that point, really, I mean, unless you can find a dentist, you're going to have to pull it. So you can try that. Antibiotics, if you can have those, that'll get you by, because antibiotics will help you with an infected root. And you can give yourself a week or two, but you're ultimately going to have to find a dentist or pull the thing if you get into that situation.
Well, but where we were going with this, and we kind of know, I'm glad you brought it. You mentioned that, bringing it back full circle to you. Like, there are civilian companies out there where you can get, medications, without, having to go through your doctor. So you just mentioned penicillin. I still have a bunch of penicillin from the things that have happened to me in the not too, distant past. And I didn't go through them all, and I kept that stuff because of the things that we're talking about. Like, I don't care if somebody says, what is it? Oh, it's expired after a year. Well, you know what? If it's 5 years from now and I need it, and I'm going to still roll with it. I mean, it's going to be better than not having any penicillin, right? So,
Yep.
yeah. So, all right, moving on, guys. We're almost done. You guys good? Or do you want to add more to medicine? I mean, there's so much we could be talking about medicine.
So
I mean,
there's
seriously.
just one thing that I think is worth
Okay.
bringing up, and I don't know, Mark, if you have heard of this, or Paul, if you've heard of this, but honey is something that actually has numerous applications. And while I want to stress to people, it's not permanent. Honey is not a permanent application, but it can help with mild open wounds, abrasions, and it also, I've used
Hang on
honey
real
to
quick,
alleviate.
Hey, New Wrangler, if you're
Yep.
still on board, thank you very much for your comments
Yeah.
tonight, sir. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
us, and stay tuned. We'll be doing more of these in the future. So thanks, New Wrangler. Sorry, Jeremy. He just said he had to run, so I just wanted to throw that out.
100%. Yeah, no,
Honey.
I've used honey to actually alleviate tooth issues, because it does have somewhat of a soothing part of it. So you could use it, like I said, for small cuts and abrasions, for tooth issues. It's not a permanent solution, but it can help, and it makes a pretty good adhesive. So,
well, and and just to throw this out there, I mean, again, if you're going to bug in and things go okay, but it's still messed up, that honey can then be turned into making into candies, into your own granola bars. So I'm not going to lie. I've got 2 of the ice cream bucket size things of honey, and maybe 2 other, soda bottle size of honey. And then I probably got 4 small things of honey. It's honey. When I bought it, it wasn't that expensive. It's different now, obviously, but I'm just throwing this out there to your point. There's so many value. There's so much value to honey that's to me, that would be worth more than gold. If somebody said, here's a gold bar, I'm like, I don't want that. Here's a thing of honey. I'll take that from you. Yeah. Plain and simple.
I was going to say, as a tradable commodity, like honey does have inherent tradability. And at least I would assume it would, because it's not only a, one of those things that improves that quality of life and keeps up morale because it's sweet, but you can take things that otherwise wouldn't take good, use honey with it. Medicinally,
and the medicinal value, medicinal value that you just brought up.
The medicinal value is there. It does help create a somewhat of a buffer against infection. Again, it's not permanent, but it is a temporary solution to a long-term issue typically. So that being said, the only final thing I want to put on there is, from what I understand as it pertains to poisons and venoms, is the way that people typically suffer under those conditions when they're introduced to venom or a poison is it comes back to an allergic reaction. So there are people that have been bitten by rattlesnakes, black widows, brown recluses, and they're, for the most part, they're pretty okay. You have other people that are bitten by those things and they succumb just like that. So a lot of it comes down to an allergic reaction, which is unfortunate, because until it happens, you don't know how bad it's going to be for the most part.
Well, but not to take away from what you're saying, but just to go into what you said earlier, it also has to go in your physical condition has something to play. Like, again, all of these things affect each and every one of us very differently. So just for the record, disclaimer, we're learning from Paul. Paul's smarter than us, but we're not trying to offer medical advice. So that's what we're trying to do. Right. But to Jeremy's point, I mean, it's obvious. It should be obvious. Everybody's different and everybody reacts to things differently. But at the end of the day, generally speaking, the healthier you are, the more physically fit you are, the more you can combat and ward off these things. And a bee sting is just a bee sting. If you're emaciated, that picture of me and your diet is shit and you're already having an infection or two, a bee sting might be the thing that lays you up for a week and now you starve to death,
Yeah.
Robert, Narcan. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, everybody should have Narcan on there. Thank you, Robert. That was awesome. Spoon, well done.
That's great.
Well played. All right, Paul, what else do you got here? We're kind of wrapping it up. You must have something to add, sir.
No, I mean, I think that there's, it just recently I grabbed the hold of a shelf and something, it hurt. It felt like a sting. And I'm not sure if it was a piece of metal or whatever from that rusty old shelf, or if it was a bee or a spider. And I tried all kinds of things, and I used a natural salve on that and put it under a Band-Aid for a while, because I tried everything else. I tried pulling with the splint, all kinds of stuff. So, I may sound like natural things don't necessarily work. No, I'm absolutely 100% for natural. Just chronic things. I think we need to make sure that we're doing the appropriate thing there. And again, consult with your doctor, not me. But it worked. And later on, I was able to, I couldn't even find it. But whatever it was, it disappeared. And, I sealed it up and it was good. So have those type of things there, because I tried everything else, Neosporin and alcohol and magnifying glass, even though I had my glasses plus a magnifying glass, and I still couldn't see anything. But I was, you dig away. But then as you mentioned, if you're doing stuff like that when you're in the field somewhere, you risk infection. And the things I was doing, I wouldn't do if I wasn't in my house right now. So.
Yep.
Well, and you just brought up a good point. And so again, for everybody watching, whether it's live tonight or, it's somewhere in the future, again, we're not trying to, this isn't a all encompassing, here's the thing you have to have. It's a conversation. And just in the conversation we just had right here with Paul, a lot of people would be thinking about their IFAC, their individual first aid kit. They'll be thinking about certain things. And most people will be thinking GSW. But I'm glad you just said what you said, because to me, I'm thinking tweezers. I'm thinking, styptic pencils. I'm thinking all these other smaller things that we all, we already just said it, guys. So like 800 milligram ibuprofen or whatever it might be. Somebody was talking about garlic to stave off vampires. Yes, and maybe some garlic, whatever. Whatever you think the environment is or the scenario is, then you have to prepare for that. And, so if you're thinking garlic, because you think it's vampire, whatever that Twilight series is, well, then you better have a garlic crusher, because I don't think the clove by itself is good enough. You're going to have to crush the garlic and, make it into a water, solution so you can spray it on them like a cat or something. I don't know. I'm just making a little bit fun here, and I just saw somebody, what was that spoon? An anti-inflammatory? I couldn't quite catch it. You pulled it up.
I think that I believe that was Robert who brought that up.
Well, that's something about zombies. I thought I saw something about an anti-inflammatory. But so anyway, the point just being here is, okay, there it is. But garlic. Again, garlic cloves, they don't weigh anything. They don't take up a lot of space. Maybe you do want to have some of those in your med kit / again, food, fire, water, shelter. You might use that, crush one up every now and then. And maybe it'll make that brick tout or that tree rat taste a little bit better, whatever. And to Robert's point, and it's going to help maybe keep and to your point as well, Redbeard, it's going to help keep your physical fitness, your mental fitness, whatever. If that helps, then maybe that's something that you need to have in your go bag. And I think the point I've just been trying to do with this whole course, and again, thanks to Redbeard and Paul for helping out, is to the ultimate point is there is no one answer. You've got to think this stuff through. And, to Robert, who I think it was Robert who just said garlic. If you can do it, why not throw some garlic, cloves in your ruck? They weigh nothing, they can, they'll just let them drift down your rucksack. They'll fall into spaces in between your million pairs of socks and other things, and you just got to fish them out. It's not a bad idea, honestly.
Yeah.
All right, guys, moving on. We're almost done here.
Yep.
All right, so here we go. Oh, I think I just screwed something up. Oh, here we go. I got to change the view. There we go. So we're ending it on, this is how we're going to end it. We're going to end it on, so we've talked about, food, fire, water, shelter, shoot, move, communicate, medicate. But I'm just going to end it with this thing that I don't know how to call it. It's the X factor. So if you go back to Mission Critical Podcast, see our episode on Carver, so one of our guests, there's a different name for it. He calls it something different. I just call it the X factor. It's shiny things, right? You've got to be prepared. There's things that you don't know are going to happen. Some things you can never prepare for. It's like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And you can say, well, what if there was a nuclear freaking bomb? Come on, man. But shiny things. My point here is you can't plan for everything in the world, but there might be some things. And so in Paul's world, I don't want to speak for Paul, but this is why Paul's here. Paul is the tech expert of the three of us. This is Paul's world. Paul, what would be a shiny thing in your opinion that if you could get away with it, it'd be worth carrying in your rucksack? Because it does some weird thing for you. It makes you feel better when you're sad, which then lifts you up and keeps you to, going another day. You see what I'm kind of getting at, fellas?
Yep.
Paul, what do you got?
mean, honestly, the lame part is the phone. Everybody needs a phone, so that's not really that shiny anymore because everybody has one. Everybody needs one. But maybe you have a gaming system that you want to take with you to occupy your time in the nighttime when there's nothing else going on, or when it comes to communicating with your friends. You have kids that have phones that they can no longer communicate through the cell phone systems. Do they have do you have a device that their friends can communicate short area distance? That might be a shiny thing, for your family, so they could share that, so that maybe another family somewhere down the road, they can still text even without having cell communications. But I would say the cell phone, honestly, at this point, is the smartphone is the shiny thing.
Well, no, it is a shiny thing.
Yep.
So I'm glad you just said it that way, because I just saw. I think it was last week. I saw a different podcast, and somebody was talking about this inevitable war with China, and putting that aside. But look, I'm not gonna discount or disparage this person, but they were talking about hey, and they were giving their ideas go get this survival food, go do this, and whatever. I don't agree. I don't disagree with some of the things that they were saying. But part of their commentary was and go out and get a GPS phone, right? There's a lot of radios, GPSs that have radios built in. And I just kind of wanted to say, well, if we're in that type of scenario, what makes you think there's still going to be satellites in which we can, rely upon? But to that person's point, and what you just said, Paul, is if it still works, I mean, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Okay, if I can afford to do it, and if I have the cube and the weight, and I can put it in my rucksack, and if it really does still work, because satellites, not all satellites have been destroyed. And so this thing allows me to talk to my son or my daughter or my wife, and I know they're alive. Well, and I can do this once every 3 days for, 10 minutes. That is a shiny thing that might just keep you alive as you're trying to make your way back home. That's all I'm trying to say. Redbeard.
Yeah, honestly, this, I feel like I can be a little funny with this, seeing as it's closer to the end. But I'm, and Marky and Paul, you might chuckle at this, but I'm kind of basic bitch. I like my coffee. Add a little bit of cocoa in that coffee, whether it's in the morning or at night, over a fire, and then having just whether it's a cracker or some type of cookie to go with that, dude. I'm telling you, that's I pack it every time I go out on an extended trip or camping. And out of all the stuff that I have, when I sit down and I have that coffee and I have that cracker or that cookie, I'm like, dude, I don't even care about anything anymore. I am absolutely just zenned out at that point. And I mean, the whole forest could start on fire and I'd be like, no, I'm sitting all right. So no, that's my shiny thing, because in the end of the day, we take things like that for granted. If the world stops, there's limited supply of coffee. I mean, there's a lot of coffee, but there's, we don't live in South America or Africa where a lot of this stuff is sourced. I mean, there's very few places, I think even in the United States, that may grow it. And it's even then, dude, I love coffee. I like those little sweet treats that you have with coffee. That's just me. Like I said, I'm super basic, but to me, that's everything.
So we just had a comment from somebody watching saying he's just catching us at the end of, or he's just catching the end of this. He's on duty right now. Yeah. Excellent. So thanks, Robert. And actually, I think Robert made a couple.
Thanks, Robert.
Comments. Yep. But Jeremy, to your point, and it's the same to the point Paul made, I think that's exactly why I threw this in there, because let's just be honest, whether it's, it could be a piece of Wrigley chewing gum, one piece a day. Yeah. Or to Jeremy's point, yeah, again, whatever.
Yeah.
Or it could be, I get, this isn't Copenhagen, but like I get one thing of Copenhagen a day or one cigarette a day, whatever it is, dude, whatever your shiny thing is, it could also just be like having a cross or an amulet or if that thing helps take you back from the edge, or if that thing helps make you feel that you're armor plated and you can actually go another 5 miles today, if that's the thing that helps you to survive, to me, that's the shiny thing I'm talking about right here. And I think the value of that is it's hard to describe because it's going to vary from person to person. Paul, do you have a shiny thing? Like, what would you? Well, see, there's Big Spoon, his Masonic ring, right? Like, see him, he doesn't want to get rid of his ring, right? He's going to use that, and he's going to rub it, look at it, touch it, and he's going to think about, his degrees and what it means to be a Mason. And, and for some people might watch this in the future, like, no, that doesn't mean the Illuminati. I'm like, well, at least no one ever told me about it when I went through it. But Paul, what would be a shiny thing for you? Where would you take this?
Honestly, listening to Redbeard, I was thinking about teas. You can make teas.
Dude.
So if you can get, into them, and then Mish posted something about
titanium,
dandelion. Well, titanium is shiny, but not always shiny physically.
But it's a shiny thing. I definitely want titanium.
I love titanium.
Yep.
But I was referring. She mentioned something about roasted dandelion root, and about it being coffee. I was wondering if that's coffee or tea. I don't know. But my point before that was, you can make teas out there. They're not necessarily going to have maybe the caffeine. Redbeard, I don't know if that's part of it, but I love coffee too. So you can only carry so much, and I don't think we can grow it in our area either. So,
I think that, to hit on your point, Paul, for me, it's that warming sensation, which and this sounds kind of dumb, but it's like you feel you feel like an embrace of comfort, like you could have, there's so many days that have been just shitty days for me. And it's like, I'll sit down and I'll have a cup of coffee, and it's like, immediately it's like, nope, it's all good. It's all good.
I killed that guy. Sorry. There's been a fly in my house here for like the last 30 minutes. And I just killed that son of a bitch. So there's my shiny thing. I hate flies. And I felt good after, removing him from my environment. But hey, but fine, on a serious note, whether it's a sip of vodka, whether it's some tobacco in the form of, Copenhagen, or a cigar or a cigarette, or if it's tea or coffee. Jeremy, I'm totally on board with you. Like, dude, coffee and a biscuit. Like, I don't care if it's in the evening. Yeah, seriously. I would go out of my way to be like, even if I had to ration it once every 3 days, like, that would be the thing that would rejuvenate me. That and a fresh pair of socks and a good foot massage with a whole bunch of, Gold Bond on my feet. Seriously, I'd be like, okay, I'm ready to go for another 3 days. So but that's what I mean. And everybody's going to have their own thing, right? For some people, it's a nose picking, or it's a toothbrush. I mean, I'm serious. I'm not trying to be gross. It varies from person to person. I mean, it just does. But find your shiny thing and embrace it, and don't be afraid of it. Like, now, if it weighs 50 pounds, well, then it's probably going to be the thing that, see the slide. Yeah. Here, I'll bring up the slides,
Don't take your TVs.
Use caution, right? If it distracts you from the things that really matter, then it's a bad thing, right? So take a breath and think about it. But shiny things are, they're must. I really personally believe they are a must have. And so again, go see our episodes on Carver, because we talk about it at the very end, because Carver doesn't account for the shiny things. And one of our guests actually calls it something different. He's still in that kind of military orbit. I've just always called it the X factor, or the shiny thing. And that's what we're talking about right now. Okay. Spoon, Stone, and some weird comments. All right, here we go, boys. We're at the very last slide.
Beautiful.
I think we've already covered this. I kind of want to go to Paul first here, Jeremy, because you're going to end up taking us out. But Paul, you've already talked about this. Don't wait until you're in the middle of emergency to start preparing for it. It's that, you don't want the first time you try a new skill to be when you're in an emergency, right? Or when it really matters. You've kind of already alluded to this. You want to add a little bit more at the very end here? Because at the end of the day, what I'm just trying to say is all of this conversation and everything that we're doing, that's all fine and dandy. Watch it at your leisure, get some books, but at the end of the day, you have to go out and you have to do this. It's all about muscle memory. You've got to get the reps in, whether it's shooting a handgun, single-handed, offhand, two-hand, long gun, starting a fire, making a shelter, whatever the task is, you've got to get the muscle memory, and you don't want that to happen. I personally, in my humble opinion, you don't want the first time you're trying to do something is when it really matters and your life is on the line.
Yep.
I mean, there's some things that, that might just be the case. Like, hey, I've never done this before. But if you've practiced and rehearsed and trained on other things, your mental mindset is going to be like, it's okay. I can figure I can think my way through this. I've got a bunch of skills. I've done this before. I'll be able to figure it out. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep. I can hear you.
But I can hear you.
Yep.
This is the problem with my little thing. Just lost. So anyway, you guys, this is all for you anyway. So who wants to take this one as I'm switching batteries around?
Go first, Paul.
Okay, so I agree with you. So the first thing is don't just buy stuff, test it, use it, whether it's a backpack, whether it's a piece of cord or anything like that, firearm, anything. Just make sure that you practice with everything before you do this. If you buy something and it doesn't work for you, sell it off, and or give it away, donate it. Find something that works for you. Just make sure that you practice with it and you know how to use it before you get out into the field, or if you need it. And you'll find that if you go out, you'll find that. All right, well, this works for me, but I kind of don't like the way it feels. But maybe this will be better. And it takes a long time, but just at a lower level, just make sure that you test everything that you buy. Don't just buy it, put it in a pack, and assume you're going to use it later.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Paul. Very well said. And I actually could piggyback off of what you're saying, which to me is, and you could probably elaborate a little bit more off of this, and Mark, I'm sure you could as well. But I mentioned this before: be intentional with your training. So even if all you have is 50 rounds for that day, or if all you have is 30 minutes, or whatever the case is, intentional training. Have intent behind your training. The same thing as purchases. If you're going to buy something, as you mentioned, Paul, make it intentional. Make there be a reason why you're buying that piece of gear. If you're buying it just because you want to buy it, that's one thing. But if you're buying it for the whole reason that this is to save your life, make it intentional. Training and purchases need to be intentional. Now, the final thing that I want to add to that, and I will kind of relent for you guys for a moment, is look, practice and training brings forth competency. Competency translates into confidence. The more competent you become at something, the more confident you'll become at something, and confidence will bring about a better realm of survivability, right? Because the better you feel about something, the better you're going to perform. So this is a whole line of different things that in succession all play into one thing to another. And a lot of that stems from intentional purchases and intentional training, which all runs that gambit. So
I'm just going to add one last thing before you take us out. I mean, and I love what you just said, but the thing that I've seen, unfortunately, too many times in my life is a overinflated confidence. It's not a confidence based on competency, as you just said, Jeremy. Mm-hmm. So I love what you just said. Right? It's not that, hey, this guy's done 1,000 reps and he really knows the technique or whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. No, it's a guy who's done 3 reps and he got it right, and now he thinks he knows everything. That's dangerous. I'm not joking. That is dangerous. So
we all know that guy too.
Yeah,
we've all seen him.
Yeah. But I love how you just said that, because I think when we're actually, again, go back to episode 1, this is survival. This is real world. There's no room for ego. There's no, I'm a former this and therefore that, have you ever been in this scenario before? Well, no. Okay. But if your next thing is no, however, I've been in, scenarios very similar to this, and here's how we were able to pull our shit, our asses out of the fire. Okay, that I want to hear. But if I just hear somebody say, well, I'm just going to, Jeremy, as we say all the time, I'm just going to grab my rucksack and head off into the woods. Like, okay, John Wayne.
Well, there goes Mark. I guess you won't see
there
him
you go.
again. Oh,
see ya, bye.
Bye, Mark.
Oh, I got a weird view. Sorry. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, but no, see ya. Bye. All right. All right. Hey, guys, this has been a longer episode. We're an hour over what we normally did, but I think we had to do this tonight, and it's the final episode of it. And so when you really think about it, what we've done online has been a little bit over 5 hours. And again, as I said, this used to be a full day course. So I don't think we've cut any corners. It's a little bit more condensed. I would like this to be a little bit more fleshed out. I wish, again, if everybody was, face to face, if we were in person, it would result, it would produce a different result. But I don't know. I'm pretty happy with how this first thing went. Let me just pull up the slide deck real quickly. So we just said that you don't want the first time you try this to be when it really matters. And there's my concluding slide because come on, you remember that guy?
Oh yeah.
Dude, he's so badass. Come on. That shit is so funny. Oh, Hans Bricks. All right. If anybody's
that's
watching,
the dad, isn't it?
What's that?
That's the dad.
That's the dad. Yeah. But that was back during the I can't remember what the name of the movie is. Team
America.
Yeah, that was Team America. And Hans Bricks. That shit was funny. I thought that was pretty clever. So anyway, what do you guys got to say? I mean, otherwise we're wrapping this up, and here's my final comments for everybody. For anyone, who's watched, tonight, or the previous 2 episodes. I mean, we're trying to have fun. We're trying to not really teach. I mean, we're trying to guide a conversation. I really love all the comments that people have led. It seems like we had another great group of people here tonight. We did last time. I'm going to give a huge shout out to Spoon over my left shoulder. Spoon in the background here. Matter of fact,
way to go, Spoon.
Hang on, let me bring Spoon up. There's Spoon right there. So all the boys and girls, that's a guy behind, look at that ugly mug. But he is the guy behind the scenes who's been
Thank you,
doing
Spoon.
a little back and forth with everything. And that's it. My final comment is I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope you learned even just one thing out of all this. And that helps you survive. And that's what the whole intent was. And then other than that, this has been a ton of fun for me. I do have to give Paul a big shout out because
thank you, Paul.
Paul's taken huge amount of time out of his life to join us. And that's really cool. Thank you very much, Paul. Really appreciate your insights. Jeremy, you're just a knucklehead who shaved off his beard, so I don't know what to say to you, but that's it. That's my takeaway. Who wants to take us out? What do you guys got? Big Spoon, do you want to chime in here? Do you want to say anything before we turn it over to the real Paul and the real Redbeard? You got something? That's you, Big Spoon. Yeah, you can unmute your mic.
I guess the only thing I have to really bring in is I've enjoyed helping out with these guys because I've been listening to Mark talk about these things for years. They helped me quite a bit with my personal life and my work. And I guess, the rest of these guys, they've helped out quite a bit with, increasing my personal knowledge. Everyone in the comments, thanks for being polite and respectful and not making me have to actually boot anybody. So that's a good thing. Looking forward to keeping it up for a while. And thanks for the fun.
I think you're muted, Mark.
Mark, you're
I was muted because Redbeard's right over the corner. I didn't want to Spoon's right over my shoulder. And I didn't want our audio to kind of over, just go over each other. But I do want to say this. I mean, Big Spoon just brought up a great point, and I am really grateful. It's Spoon's taking the time out of his life. He's got a busy fucking schedule. I mean, he's just here helping out, and And, you're right. If people were, you saw the chat, I didn't see the chat, that people are being respectful, and because that's what we're trying to do. I'm like, there's no point to be a troll. I mean, Redbeard, you and I, we had a troll over on Mission Critical, like 5 episodes ago. We had our first troll.
It took months. I'm shocked.
But that's not cool, right? But so again, we're just trying to do some things and have some fun because again, at the end of the day, I had a 13-hour day before we even started this podcast. And so, we're all tired, we're all humans, we're all adults, we all got a million things going on, and we're just trying to find a way to give something back. And honestly, I'm gonna have to give Paul, no offense to you, but I'm gonna give props to Redbeard and Big Spoon, because I talk to them more often. They're in my little circle. We're up here in northern Minnesota, and it's the nice kick in the ass. So I mean, maybe that's the X factor, going back into those shiny things at the very end of the class. You need to have that X factor. You need to have the people, the group, the dynamic, where you've got people who can compel you to be better, who can draw on the things that you already have to offer, and that makes a better group of people who have a better chance of survival, whatever the scenario is. And I think that would be my takeaway from tonight. So if anyone, watch these videos, listen to them if you want to, whatever. But at the end of the day, you better find a good group of people that you think you have a good group of people. You better find a good group of people. It's not, unfortunately, it's usually not what people think it is, in my opinion. But I think you guys are, and I appreciate each and every one of you coming on and help me be a better person myself. And I've learned a lot from talking to you guys for the last 3 segments here. So that's my final comment.
What do you got, Paul?
I'm always learning. That I don't consider myself an expert, even though over years and education and so on, whatever. I learn every day, and we all need to do that. It doesn't matter what field you're in, what you do in life, what you plan on doing down the road. Always learn, and I do that every day. That's just my philosophy, and that's. And I enjoy passing on my knowledge, but I also enjoy accepting new knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Unmute still. I mean, there it is. I mean, accepting new knowledge, being open-minded, being adult enough to realize you don't know everything. And that's a great thing right there. And we had a cool comment from Mish. Spoon brought it up. Thank you, Mish, for your comments.
Thank you very much
for joining us tonight. I don't know if we need more of us. Honestly, we might need more men with beards, but I don't know if we need more of the 3 of us. I mean, that's problematic. All right, Redbeard, the outro is yours, sir. We're at 2 hours and 30 minutes. It's been a long podcast, but hey, give us your final comments, if you will, and if you don't mind, take us out on our standard Mission Critical podcast outro, if you don't mind, and then we're out when you take us out, sir.
So just want to bring up a couple points. Basically, I have to reiterate what Paul said, and to further kind of elaborate on that a little bit, humility, a little bit of humility goes a long way. Open yourself up and challenge your own points of view, and challenge what you think because who knows? I mean, what might be right. It might be the best way of doing something, or what Mark might know might be better, or what Paul might know might be better. At the end of the day,
dude, you're such a teaser. Or a little bit of what you said, and a little bit of what Paul said, and a little bit of what Mark said. You take those things and you make them your own new thing. That's beautiful right there.
And that's and that's the nice thing is we have the opportunity to take, again, our different backgrounds, our experiences, to blend that together to kind of provide you a plethora of options, really, in different viewpoints for you to be able to come and assess this information, to be this makes sense, or this doesn't make sense, but I want to know why it doesn't make sense to me, or whatever the case is. Ultimately, get out there, train, do whatever you possibly can to get yourself the healthiest you can be, no matter what age you're at. Health gets a lot harder. Fitness gets a lot harder as you get older. And the reality of it is it's important. And I want longevity for Mark. I want longevity for Paul. I want longevity for Spoon and myself and other people. And the only way to do that is by putting time and effort into that as much as anything else pertaining to training. That being said, we have some pretty awesome people, not just Paul or Spoon, but other guests that we've had in the course of doing this. And seriously, like, big props to you guys. It might sound like an overstatement, but I don't really feel like we could have done this without each of you guys and gals, and all the people that contribute in the comments, all the people that share and like and subscribe all of this. We appreciate you. You guys make it worth it. And I would say during the course of this, the comment section really kind of stole a show, in my opinion. Here we are talking about a lot of different things, but look at how much that they contributed to the overall conversation.
So I don't see what you guys see, as you well know. And for people who are only just watching this episode, we've talked about this in episode 1 and 2.
Yeah.
So I'm in a different view because I'm in the software. Spoon's in the software, but he's also got another monitor up. But it looks like we had 165 comments. We didn't have a lot of people watching it with us live, but we have 165 comments. So Redbeard, to your point, I think that is awesome. At least the people who are here, and you and I have said this a million times, I don't care if it's one person. I'm here and I'm going to do it because this matters to me. And but I'm looking at the number. I can finally see the number of comments now. I pulled up a different screen because we're ending it, and it appears to be 100. Spoon, am I reading that wrong? Was that 165 comments? So that seems like a lot of people. Yeah. So it seems like there were some people pretty engaged in the chat, at least. Anyway, I didn't see any of that stuff. So Jeremy, to your point, that's awesome. I mean, it really is. Now, I'm not going to lie. This is my only area for improvement. So the what went well's area for improvement. After action review, I really, really wanted to have somebody in the chat come on live with us and then be a face, just like Spoon is right now, and make their statement or make their comment. So maybe when we do this again, it's the first time we've done this. I don't know if anyone ever does a live stream like that to bring people on. So maybe that's a little weird and unheard of, but I think we should do this again in the future. And I really would love 100%. To see the people who are interacting in the chat and all that stuff. At least a handful of people come on and say, you guys, your beards suck. Or, hey, here's another thing that you should consider. Because we had some really great comments from people tonight. Honestly, I think episode 2 and this one were probably some of the best comments. We had a lot more comments last week, but we had some really good comments this week as well. So that means there's good people out there. I mean, honestly.
Gives me hope. And like I said, really, like it's all of that really makes it worth it. So,
Paul, you're not crying, are you, sir?
No, I'm good. It's been a long day for me as well, so I'm just a little bit. Yeah, I'm good. I agree. So, I agree with you.
Hey, so what were you drinking tonight?
Bourbon.
Paul, what were you drinking?
Bourbon.
Okay, I was drinking vodka. Okay. Paul, final comments before Redbeard gives us the closing remarks. Actually, we got to give Spoon final comments too.
Spoon had something too.
Well, Spoon's drinking energy drinks. That doesn't count. Whatever. But let's go to Paul. Paul, what are your final comments?
Well, that's because I have to get up late.
I hear
you have to get up late.
Early. I think you meant
the thing you think they mean. Oh, he needs to go to bed. Okay.
So,
all right, Paul, you take us out, sir. Well, Jeremy's going to take us out. Paul, what are your final comments?
I think that, if you can take the time, watch the 3 episodes of this training, you'll get a good foundation. Maybe we can expand upon that. Put your comments when you're watching it, not live. And that way Mark can get ideas and Redbeard can get ideas of future trainings that you can, we can then provide for you. And maybe it involves me, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's somewhere, out of my area. But either way, the more you comment, the better it will be for future training opportunities for you.
And just a small plug. I mean, on that note, we kind of said this earlier. Like, I'm pretty sure they're still on my YouTube channel over on Centerline Systems. But Spoon and I spent 2 2 days doing this whole, like, emergency signal thing. We had a drone in the whole 9 yards. So if you can go and watch it, I mean, it didn't get a lot of views. I mean, probably because it was too real. I mean, like, oh, that's what a buzzsaw looks like at 200 meters. I'm like, and it's through a camera. I get that kind of stuff, but a small plug. I mean, based on everything we're saying, it's like, again, it's not just this easy. You're not just going to throw a rucksack on your back and just go. There's so many things you have to take in consideration. And that, to me, this is my final comment. That's what we were trying to accomplish here in the last 3 episodes. And it's also something that Spoon and I did, again, 3 years ago, with the emergency signal videos that we did over at Centerline Systems. So, at the end of the day, I hope anyone who watches this video, is the type of person that takes a moment of pause and doesn't think that, hey, because I have this, that, or the other, I know everything. That's usually not how life works. That's for what it's worth. All right, Jeremy, take us out, sir.
Yeah.
So, and for it looks like, hang on, Spoon, am I correct? It looks like we got a couple people watching. Is that correct?
4.
Am I reading that right? He's giving me he sees it differently than I do, but yeah, so there's still a handful of people watching us live. Hey, and my final comment to each and every one of you who are still watching this, thank you very much, and God bless you. And I hope nothing but the best for you guys. And and I really mean this seriously. I hope none of these things that we're talking about ever come to pass. And it'll be a funny joke, when we're all like, 80 years old and on a beach someplace drinking Mai Tais or some shit like that. So I hope that's the case. All right, Jeremy, take us out, sir.
All right. So, I second Mark, and everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you for staying with us this long. And you gave up some time in your day, and we greatly appreciate it. On that note, catch us over also at Mission Critical Podcast. That's where we do most of our primary videos. We will be doing, I believe, a lot more of our classes on this through Centerline Systems. So check that out whenever we get ready to drop those. Feel free to stop in. And on that note, look, and Mark, I know you like this portion. The flame of liberty shall not and will not ever be extinguished so long as good people exist to defend and support it. So, and that means each and every one of you.
Damn
so thank you. We appreciate it. And on that note, take care.
Woo! Oh, I didn't hit end. There we go. Now I'm hitting end. Stupid cursor mouse.